Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly into a cold stone corridor, where the scent of old wax, dusty straw and damp wool hovers in the air like a sleeping cat. You're in a medieval convent. Your sandals scuff against uneven flagstones as you pace beside high cloister walls, and your breath fogs slightly in the early evening chill. Somewhere above, a bell tolls vespers. But it's not the bells that catch your attention, it's the sleeve of the nun walking beside you. It's wiggling, you stare at it, half hypnotized by the way it gently squirms. The sister doesn't seem to notice, or maybe she does, and just smiles. As you inch closer, a tiny pink nose pokes out from the sleeve. Two beady eyes follow. It blinks at you, yawns, then retreats with a soft chitter back into the folds of rough wool. Welcome to a world where ferrets were secret convent companions. Tiny, whiskered fugitives in a world of prayer, parchment and piety. A world where being cloistered didn't necessarily mean being alone. You probably won't survive this. Not because it's dangerous, but because the warm, drowsy rhythm of it all might knock you right out before we even finish the cheese heist. And yes, there's a cheese heist. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop your city and local time in the comment. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge deeper into the convent. The sun's just dipped behind the monastery wall, casting everything in a thick medieval blue. You're not sure why you're here exactly, but you get the sense no one really is, not back then anyway. Maybe you're a visiting scribe, maybe a curious novice. Either way, you're now part of the daily rhythm. You pass silent figures gliding through corridors, some carrying baskets, some holding candles, some with just a glimpse of soft fur disappearing into a sleeve. Historians still argue whether this practice was widespread or just a peculiar quirk of a few eccentric convents, but the reports exist, scattered in marginalia, hinted at in letters, whispered like holy gossip. The cloister smells of lavender, rushes and old stone. You reach a garden where lavender bushes are going feral. A small shape darts through the underbrush. Blink and you'd miss it, but your new furry companion sees it, and gives a sharp, delighted chirp inside your sleeve. No one talks during evening prayers, but you hear breathing, the soft rustle of robes, and every so often, an unmistakable sneezing fit. Yes, ferrets are notorious for setting off allergies. Scholars have debated whether these creatures were truly pets in the modern sense, or a form of pest control gone rogue. The lines blur. After all, a ferret in your sleeve is handy when you need warmth, or when you're hiding a bit of sausage from the refectory. The average ferret eats quite a bit, and makes a mess doing it. But you don't mind. You feel oddly comforted by the subtle twitch of your robe's lining. It's companionship in a place where silence ruled. In a time when options for affection were slim, a small, curious, half-domesticated weasel could be everything. You settle onto a bench, the convent walls glow in candlelight. Someone's humming in the distance, quietly, carefully, so no one gets scolded. Your ferret pokes out again, sniffs the air, then nuzzles your hand. You remember a half-translated Latin passage, where a sister referred to her sleeve soul. Maybe that's what this is, not just a ferret, a secret, a friend, a cozy, wriggly slice of rebellion. Outside, the sky goes purple. Someone drops a bucket. You jump, your ferret doesn't. Inside, everything slows down. Maybe you weren't expecting this. A soft, hidden corner of medieval life. But now that you're here, you're not in a rush to leave. Not tonight. You rise early, though you'd hardly call it waking when sleep in this convent is more of a borrowed stillness than deep rest. The bell doesn't jolt you awake. It seeps into your dreams like incense, through a cracked chapel window. Lauds. Time to move. You shuffle into the chapel alongside other sleepy-eyed sisters, robes swishing in time with their sandals. The candlelight flickers against the stone walls, catching glimmers of faded paint and flaking saints. Some of the women murmur prayers with practiced ease. Others look like they haven't fully left their beds. And then there's you, straining to remember which psalm comes next, while a tiny furry body shifts against your forearm. Your ferret yawns audibly inside your sleeve, little jaws stretching in a way that makes you bite your lip to keep from smiling. You stroke its back gently with your thumb through the cloth. It settles again, its heartbeat a quiet echo beside your own. You're beginning to understand the rhythm of cloistered life. There's a comforting monotony to it, like rain on a tiled roof, or bread rising by a warm hearth. Historians describe these days as repetitive, but you start to suspect that's not quite fair. Monastic doesn't mean boring. It just means you start noticing things others miss, like the way Sister Elodia always hums before the bell, or how the kitchen smells different on feast days, or how ferrets always know exactly where the cheese is. Your day is measured not in hours but in bells, lauds, prime, terce, sext, nun, vespers, compline. In between are chores, reflection, reading, if you're lucky enough to be literate in silence, so much silence. But within that quiet are whispers of life, the creak of a bench, the flutter of a bird startled from the herb garden, the nearly imperceptible clicking of ferret claws on stone. You help peel root vegetables in the kitchen, the knife slow and steady in your hand. A few nuns joke softly under their breath in Latin, and you try to follow along. Your ferret makes a brave attempt at escaping, poking its head out near the turnips. You nudge it back in. Sister Magda notices and raises a brow, but says nothing. You think she has one too. Ferrets were more common than you'd expect, certainly more common than the church would admit. Officially they weren't allowed, too worldly, too distracting, but unofficially, let's just say rules bend in the cold, especially when the animal in question kills rats and warms your arm and never tells your secrets. Historians still argue whether these creatures were deliberately bred by the sisters, or simply adopted when found injured or abandoned near the convent wall. Either way, they found a home in the hearts and sleeves of many. There's a peculiar joy in their presence, a comfort, one you can't quite name, maybe because you don't speak much, and they never demand word, or maybe it's because in a world where you own nothing, where everything belongs to the order, this tiny creature is yours, not in the sense of possession, but of mutual knowing, of shared warmth. You sit in the scriptorium after lunch, the world outside dimmed behind latticed windows. Dust motes float like tiny spirits in the sunlight. You dip your pen in ink, and scratch letters carefully across a stiff page. Your ferret sleeps curled along your ribs, so still you forget it's there, until it lets out a surprisingly loud sneeze. Sister Ingrid across the table jumps. You stifle a laugh. She glares. You return to your writing. Outside a bird chirps. Your pen scratches. Somewhere in the convent, another sleeve twitches. You wonder what your ferret dreams about. Maybe tunnels, or breadcrumbs, or whatever's hiding under the laundry rack. Or maybe, just maybe, it dreams of you. You're starting to itch. Not emotionally. Your robe is literally itchy. Scratchy wool, woven thick and coarse, clings to your skin like an overly affectionate sheet. You pull at the fabric, adjusting the neckline, wondering how anyone in this century ever survived summer and winter. Forget it. These habits must have been medieval saunas come July, and full-body iceboxes in December. You try not to fidget too much as you walk. There's a strict visual code here. Modesty first, individuality last. You glance down at your sleeves again, which are wide and deep enough to conceal an entire small livestock fair. It's no surprise that they made the perfect hiding place for an overly curious little animal. In fact, the sleeves were almost begging for it. Loose enough to let a ferret curl into your elbow crook, long enough to drape over a twitching tail. Some garments even had inner folds, secret pockets, where warm fuzzy bodies could snuggle in during chap. The ferret stirs and you feel its claws gently tapping against the inside seam, probably dreaming about the cheese again. Historians still argue whether the design of these habits unintentionally encouraged the practice of sleeve ferrets, or whether the nuns intentionally made modifications for their furry companion. There's no official tail-shaped embroidery, of course, but a few relic garments have suspicious claw-worn seams. Coincidence? Maybe, but it makes you wonder just how widespread the trend really was. Fashion in the convent isn't a subject most people dwell on, but if you pay attention, there are stories in every stitch. The scratchiness, a form of penance. The color, usually undyed, the color of raw wool, or maybe black or brown for certain orders. The layers, practicality. You needed warmth, coverage, modesty and maybe just maybe room for a ferret. You pause in the hallway as an older sister passes. Her robes are patched at the hem, and she walks with a slow, graceful rhythm that makes her look like she's floating. Her sleeves sway slightly, too slightly. There's definitely something moving under there. She notices you notice. Her mouth twitches. Not quite a smile, not quite a warning, just a silent agreement. We both know what's in there. Let's not speak of it. That's the thing about these convents. They're full of rules, yes, but also full of unwritten agreements. Silent negotiation. In theory, you're supposed to live without distractions. No vanity, no ownership, no unnecessary companionship. But loneliness has always found loopholes. You head toward the laundry room. It smells like soap, damp cloth and effort. You pass baskets of folded linen, and someone's soggy sandals. A ferret darts between drying robes, its little claws skittering on the stone floor. You keep walking pretending you didn't see it. Everyone pretends they didn't see it. The wool rubs against your neck again. You grin. Your ferret pokes its head out, sniffs the air, then retreats back into the sleeve with a huff. You feel a little bad. Maybe you should fashion it a tiny pillow out of leftover linen, something soft to line the inside of your sleeve. It's not like anyone would stop you. There are records, half-lost letters, weird marginalia, that suggest nuns embroidered small cushions or stitched inner pockets into their habits, not for cosmetics or treasures, but for their pets, or ratters, as the more practical-minded sisters might call them. And sure, maybe you can't prove that was the purpose. Maybe that stitched heart on the hem was just a symbol of devotion to God. But maybe, just maybe, it was also for a ferret named Brother Beans. You reach your cell again. One narrow bed, one table, one crucifix, a window the size of a pie. You sit on the bed and let your ferret crawl out. It stretches, shakes, then dives into the wool blanket like it's the best thing it's seen all day. You smile. You lie down beside it, the robe itching less now for some reason. The habit is heavy, but the presence beside you light, familiar, alive. You never thought you'd get used to this, but here you are, a nun's life. A scratchy robe and a ferret named Beans. It fits.
Your ferret's up before you. You know this because it's already halfway up your arm. When you blink awake, wriggling determinedly toward your shoulder, you groan. It's not the bell that woke you this time. It's the tiny, persistent claws climbing your sleeve like it's Mount Sinai. You roll over, and it flops onto your chest, stares into your face, then promptly tries to burrow under your collar. Good morning indeed. As you pull yourself from the stiff straw mattress, the little creature bolts back down your robe and disappears, probably in search of crumbs or adventure. You can't help but grin, groggy and half-blind, as you rub sleep from your eyes. Now, you might think keeping a pet ferret in a convent sounds unorthodox. You wouldn't be wrong. But here's the thing. Ferrets had their place in medieval society. They weren't always seen as exotic or mischievous little escape artists. In fact, they were considered incredibly useful, especially in the eternal war against rats and mice. These weren't pets in the lapdog sense. Ferrets were working animals. They were the pest patrol. And in a convent, where food stores were precious and parchment even more so, they were practically tiny furry guardians of the sacred. There are even records of ferrets being trained to chase rabbits out of holes, a practice still used in some rural parts of Europe today. It's not hard to imagine them weaving between the root vegetables or dashing through storerooms on the hunt. You walk past the granary now and see scratch marks near the bottom of the wooden door. Looks suspiciously ferret-like. You give it a knowing glance. Historians still argue whether ferrets were formally assigned roles in religious settings or just happened to be there and made themselves useful. Some say nuns kept them hidden to avoid church scrutiny. Others argue they were openly acknowledged as part of daily life. The truth, as always, is probably somewhere in the middle, visible when useful, invisible when inconvenient. You watch Sister Imelda sweep the steps. Something darts behind her. She pretends not to see it, but she's sweeping very carefully around a pile of leaves that appears to be breathing. Another ferret. Maybe they're multiplying. The creature's utility gave nuns plausible deniability. Oh, this isn't a pet, it's working. See how many rat tails it brings me.
Never mind that some of these ferrets wore tiny collars or were sung to in the garden. You're not saying they were spoiled, but one of them definitely has a name engraved on a polished acorn charm. You crouch beside the herb garden. Your ferret reappears, now proudly dragging something that used to be a mouse. You offer praise in whispers. It seems satisfied. You're a team now. You walk through the convent halls with a new sense of purpose. Maybe you'll start training it, teach it to sit, or pray, or at least not steal your ink quill again, though that seems like a stretch. As you pass the refectory, the delicious smell of baking hits you. Lentils and barley made, some sort of dried fruit. The cook's voice rings out as she scolds someone, probably about spices. Spice use was tightly controlled here. Too indulgent, too worldly, but every once in a while someone snuck in a clove or two. You sit down and under the table a small muzzle nudges your ankle. You reach into your sleeve and feel warm fur again. Home base. You slip it a crumb and return to your bowl. The table is long. Dozens of sisters sit side by side, their heads bowed, their hands still, and yet under all that reverence, there's movement. A tail here, a flicker of fur there, someone's foot jolts, someone else smirks faintly, their spoon halfway to their mouth. You're all in on it. Silent rebellion with tiny paws. It's oddly poetic. In a place built on routine and restraint, the presence of a creature so instinctive, so wild, is a kind of quiet protest, but also, strangely, a comfort, a reminder that life still wriggles in even the most ordered spaces. As the meal ends, you rise, hands folded, robes brushing the floor. Your ferret shifts again, curling into the crook of your elbow. A nun beside you sneezes. You don't ask, but you both know why. The convent is quiet after lunch, the kind of quiet that hums rather than sits still. You walk slowly past the granary, where bags of grain slump against one another like exhausted travelers. The air smells of straw, dust, and secrets, and possibly, ferret. You pause. You hear it, a soft scritching sound from behind the door. Not frantic, just deliberate. You lean in, peeking through the wooden slats. Inside, a nun kneels by the grain sacks, hands folded innocently in her lap. Her face is composed. Her robe is immaculate, her sleeves are suspiciously large, and beside her, poking its head from the folds like a guilty sock puppet, is a long, pale ferret, with twitchy whiskers, and a half-chewed kernel in its mouth. You back away before you're spotted. No one talks about it out loud, but the grain storage is practically ferret. Rats were a constant threat in medieval food supplies, especially in cold stone buildings with plenty of hiding places and limited resources. So what better ally than a sleek, squirmy predator that can chase rodents into their hole? You walk around the outside of the granary, and notice the small gaps under the door, just wide enough for a ferret to slip through. Coincidence? Maybe, but more likely architectural adaptation. Historians still argue whether these convents made such modifications intentionally, or simply made the best of the infestation-fighting solution, once the ferrets were already there. You take a seat on a stone bench near the entrance to the kitchen garden. It's sunny today, rare for the season, and the warmth is almost startling. Your ferret slinks out of your sleeve to bask, body coiled like a furry snake. It rolls in the grass, paws batting lazily at a leaf. You scratch its belly with a single finger and think, this is better than a dog, smaller, smarter, slightly less obedient. Of course not everyone saw it that way. Some theologians of the time frowned deeply upon familiar animals, creatures too close to their humans, too emotionally connected. In some circles, ferrets skirted dangerously close to being labeled imps, associated with mischief, temptation, even witchcraft. You picture your ferret's dopey sneeze and giggle, demonic, maybe only in the way it gnaws your laces every time you try to pray. Still, there's no denying the double life these creatures led. Pest controller by day, cuddle thief by night. You wander toward the storage cellars. They're damp and echoey, the walls sweating slightly from days of cold rain. A wooden ladder leans against one corner, its rungs well worn. You descend carefully, your ferret sniffing the air from your shoulder like a furry periscope. Down below, barrels sit stacked like sleepy giants. Your footfalls thud on the packed earth floor. In the corner, Sister Aldegundis is fussing with a tangle of rope. She looks up startled, then relaxes when she sees it's just you. Then she sees the snout poking from your sleeve, training it to count barrels. Yet, she whispers with a wink. You smile and shake your head. I gave mine a raisin yesterday. She mutters like it's a confession. I think he forgave me for the lavender bath. You both laugh quietly, of course. The ferret wriggles in your sleeve again, and you whisper something soft. A nonsense lullaby of half Latin, half affection. It blinks slowly, whiskers twitching. You head back up the stair. Outside, the sun is still holding on. A few sisters tend the herb plots. Someone is sketching herbs on parchment, probably for the infirmary records. You hear a rustling near the parsley, and catch a glimpse of fur, then a startled squeak. You pretend not to notice. That's how things work here. You notice everything. You acknowledge nothing. You're sweeping today, not because you're in trouble, though you did spill that ink pot yesterday, but because it's your rota turn. The broom's bristles are rough, made from twigs bound together with what might be hope. Each drag across the stone floor sounds like a faint applause from the past. Your ferret isn't helping. Instead, it's darting ahead, pouncing on dust bunnies as if they're mortal enemy. You try to shoo it gently, but it's having far too much fun skidding across the polished stones to take orders. Sister Euphrasia passes you in the hallway, eyes scanning your sleeves suspiciously, her lips tight, the kind of tightness that suggests she's memorized all the convent rules and has very strong feelings about every single one. You nod politely. She doesn't nod back. You sweep a little faster. Now here's where things get interesting. Officially, pets of any kind weren't allowed in most religious orders, not just because they were distracting, but because they symbolized attachment, ownership, emotional indulgence, all things a cloistered nun was meant to renounce. In some orders, even having an extra blanket was frowned upon, let alone a furry mammal living in your clothing. So why do so many nuns here have one? Historians still argue whether these creatures were smuggled in as acts of quiet rebellion or slowly adopted under the radar of more lenient abbesses. Some convent records list ratters among their tools alongside brooms, pails, and oil lamps. Others make no mention at all, as if the whole furry enterprise was an open secret too mundane to document, but too precious to ignore. You round a corner and spot a cluster of younger sisters, huddled near the cloister garden, all very interested in the same patch of grass. One squeals softly, another shushes her. You catch a glint of something gold in the grass, a tiny bell tied around a tiny neck. Oh no, they've started accessorizing. You crouch beside them and pretend you're checking for weeds. A little ferret with a cream-colored coat and a comically large attitude prances across the stones. Around its neck, a delicate ribbon, blue silk frayed at the ends. Attached to the ribbon, a charm, a crude heart, carved from bone. Sister Helena notices your look. It was from a broken comb. She whispers, I carved it during silence hour. You nod slowly, resisting the urge to say, you do know that counts as vanity, right? But you don't, because you also know she made it out of affection and boredom and a deep desire to make something beautiful in a place where beauty had rules. The ferret sniffs your fingers, then sneezes. You sit with the sisters a moment longer, sunlight filtering through the arches and warming your shoulders. The ferret wriggles into your lap, then out again. It's chaos, tiny, warm, fuzzy chaos, and it's the liveliest moment of your day. You can't help but marvel at how something so small has burrowed its way into such a strict world. These animals, technically forbidden, are more loved than many sanctioned possessions. They're like stowaways on a ship of silence, and yet, no one's turning them in. Maybe it's because they help keep the place clean, maybe because they chase away the dark during long winter nights, or maybe, just maybe, it's because in a life built on discipline, a little mess is secretly welcome. You rise at the bell. The sisters scatter. The ferret vanishes into someone's sleeve with all the subtlety of a trumpet blast. No one says a word. You sweep again, your broom scratching its rhythm on the stone. Behind you, your ferret peeks out and licks your elbow. A holy life indeed.
Evening settles like a velvet cloth over the convent, softening edges and slowing the world down. You're walking the inner cloister now, your sandals brushing against the worn stone path. the garden still humming faintly with the last bees of the day. Your habit swings with each step. And your sleeve? It wriggles. Just a little. You smile. Your ferret is awake again, which means your quiet hour might be slightly less quiet. It's been sleeping all afternoon, curled against the warmth of your ribs like a tiny furred ember. But now the air is cooler, and so it's decided, without asking of course, that it's time for activity. As you walk, it pokes its head out of your sleeve, sniffs the breeze, and disappears again, like a ghost with whiskers. You duck into the covered walkway that borders the chapel, and find a bench in the shadow of a crumbling fresco. The Virgin Mary's face is faded, but her eyes still seem kind. You sit, and your ferret takes this as an invitation to explore, worming its way up toward your shoulder, balancing on the slope like a sleepy squirrel. And this, you think, is the part no one talks about. Not the rules, not the chores, but the hidden warmth of it all. The little pockets of companionship tucked into silence, a secret movement beneath the folds of wool. Historians still debate the practicality of this behavior. Some argue that these sleeve tunnels, as they're sometimes called, were a purely accidental benefit of monastic dress. Others insist they were modified over time, stitched from the inside, to allow better airflow for the ferret, or reinforced to prevent escape mid-sermon. There's no definitive answer, but the evidence is suggestive. Surviving habits from certain 14th century convents show patterns of interior reinforcement right along the inside of the sleeve, where no human arm ever quite needed it. And more than one tattered manuscript has illustrations of nuns with oddly lumpy elbows and tails peeking where cuffs should be. The real proof, though, is in what you feel now, that slow, deliberate crawl, the curling around your forearm, the weight that isn't heavy but is unmistakably there, and the look Sister Ethelwyn gave you earlier, when your sleeve chirped in the refectory. You adjust your habit slightly, creating a more comfortable loop for your furry stowaway. It settles in like it knows exactly what this sleeve was made for. And maybe it does. You sit back and watch the moonlight stretch across the flagstones. Far off, someone rings a small bell, one of the novices being trained to signal the hours. It's off by a few minutes. No one minds. Your ferret nibbles gently at the edge of your sleeve, not enough to tear it, just enough to remind you, I'm here, I'm alive, I'm yours, at least for now. And isn't that something? You stroke the fabric near where it rests. You wonder if nuns in other convents feel this same quiet connection. If somewhere across the countryside, another woman in another habit is watching another ferret nestle into her robe, both of them silent, both of them seen only by each other. The chapel door creaks open nearby, candles flicker. Compline approaches. You rise again, careful not to jostle the warm living thing hidden in your sleeve tunnel, and as you walk back inside, you feel it shift, coil once and settle, like it's done this 100 times. Maybe it has. By now, you've stopped pretending that your ferret isn't your favorite part of the day. You're supposed to say it's the morning prayers, or the moment you feel closest to the divine, or maybe the serene silence of the garden at dusk, but really, it's this. Right, you're sitting in the scriptorium, where the hours stretch longer than the ink-stained desks, and the smell of parchment and lamp oil clings to your skin. Quills scratch, pages rust, and next to you, nestled like a well-folded thought beneath your arm, is a ball of fur dreaming something you'll never fully understand. Your ferret sighs in its sleep, a twitch of its nose, a stretch of its spine, then stillness again. You feel it breathe. Sister Dymphna glances over her manuscript and raises an eyebrow at the soft sound your sleeve just made. You look back at her blankly, expression innocent, eyes humble. She returns to her copying, and you both say nothing. That's the unspoken code here. After all, who would you tell your secrets to, if not your ferret? It's hard to describe what the companionship really is, especially in this place where words are sacred and rationed like spices. But there's something about that quiet presence, the way it always seems to understand, when you're tired, when you're cold, when you need something soft beside your heart. You've seen others do the same. Sister Gertrude humming while she stitches, her ferret's tail wrapped loosely around her wrist like a charm bracelet. Sister Winifred reading psalms aloud to hers, even though she insists it can't possibly understand the Latin declensions. And maybe she's right. Or maybe the ferret understands far more than we think.
Historians still argue whether these bonds were emotional or simply practical. Were the ferrets beloved companions, or just efficient little mouses? Did the sisters form attachments in spite of their vows, or because of them clinging to the only form of unconditional affection allowed? No one can agree. But sitting here, you're not reading footnotes. You're watching a tiny paw flex in sleep. You're feeling your own breathing slow to match the rhythm of this creature that has somehow trusted you completely. You take a break from writing and gently lay your quill down. It's late afternoon. Light slants through the high, narrow window, casting golden shapes onto the stone floor. You stretch your arms slightly, and your ferret wakes, blinks up at you with bleary eyes, and yawns the kind of yawn that makes your heart clench. It's too cute. You slide your fingers into your sleeve and stroke its back, slow and soft. Its body melts against your arm like warm wax. A moment later, Sister Cecilia enters the room, holding a sheet of music notation. She hums a fragment under her breath, trying to find the right phrasing. Your ferret's ears twitch at the sound. Does it like music? She asks, gesturing toward your sleeve without looking directly at it. You shrug. Only when it's not too much like chanting. She grins. That's the thing, they all know. Every nun here knows who's harboring a ferret, and who's not. It's not really a secret. It's a shadow game, a quiet rebellion wrapped in wool, and somehow it makes everything feel more human. You glance down and realize your sleeve is suspiciously lighter. You freeze. The ferret is gone. You look under the table, behind your writing stool, in your other sleeve, nothing. Panic stirs in your belly like a badly stirred stew. You stand up, heart racing, just as a loud squeal echoes from the hallway. Oh no! You rush outside and nearly trip over a novice who's flailing at her skirt. Your ferret pops out from the hem of her robe like a magician's assistant, and darts straight back to you. You scoop it up without thinking and stuff it into your sleeve like contraband. Sister Cecilia is trying not to laugh. The novice is trying not to cry. You apologize, hand over a crumb of bread and peace offering, and slink back to your bench, heart pounding. Your ferret settles in again, smug and unbothered. You whisper, "Don't do that again." It yawns in response, which is fair. It probably won't listen anyway. There's a hush in the convent tonight, thicker than usual. Something about the way the wind moans through the cloister arches makes everyone walk a little slower, pray a little softer, and most importantly, keep their sleeves perfectly still. You know why. The bishop is visiting, and bishops are not known for their tolerance of sleeve wildlife. You sit at the edge of the long wooden bench in the chapel, hands folded, eyes downcast, heart galloping like a hunted hare. Your ferret, sensing your tension, or maybe just amused by it, chooses this exact moment to begin a slow ascent up your arm, poking its wet nose out from your collar like a very bold bookmark. You freeze. Across the aisle, the bishop clears his throat. He's a tall man with a stern jaw, a gaze that scans rows like a falcon, searching for spiritual infractions. His robes are sharp crimson lined. You swear he could spot a sinful thought from 40 paces, and your sleeve just twitched. No one else seems to have noticed. But you can feel Sister Ethelwyn's sideways glance from 2 seats down. She saw. She always sees. You shift slightly, trying to coax your ferret back into the safety of wool and habit. It resists, of course it does. It thinks this is a game. The bishop steps forward, lifting his hands to begin the blessing. The room stills. Not a breath, not a blink. Latin fills the air, each syllable echoing off the stones like sacred pebbles skipping across water. Your ferret, perhaps moved by the spirit or perhaps just itchy, chooses now to sneeze. Twice. Quiet, but not that quiet. The bishop stops mid-sentence, his eyes narrow. You try to look like a person absolutely not hiding a ferret inside your clothes. It's a look you've been perfecting for weeks. Sister Cecilia coughs delicately, covering for you. You send her a silent blessing. The moment passes. The bishop continues. You survive. Barely. Historians still argue whether clergy in high positions ever knew about these convent creatures. Some claim bishops turned a blind eye, preferring not to dig too deeply into monastic eccentricities. Others suggest the practice was hidden entirely. Ferrets scurried out of sight whenever church officials approached, like divine contraband. A few even believe there were whispers of official warnings. Keep sleeves to yourself, no tails in the tabernacle. You wait for the final amen like it's a finish line. When it comes, you rise slowly, carefully, your ferret now sleeping once more against your side, like nothing ever happened. The meal that evening is unusually quiet. Even the novices are subdued. The bishop dines alone with the abbess, separated from the rest of you by a heavy wooden screen, probably for the best. You slip your ferret a tiny morsel of oat cake under the table. It chomps enthusiastically, as if rewarding itself for excellent chapel mischief. Later that night, back in your cell, you unroll your sleeve and let it stretch. It yawns again, its pink mouth wide, eyes blinking at the candlelight. You stroke its head and whisper, "You almost got exercise today." It licks your thumb, you chuckle softly, and your voice bounces around the stone room like a secret joke shared with the walls. You wonder how many nuns over how many centuries have done this same thing, spoken softly to a warm creature hidden in the folds of their solitude. You picture a tapestry, centuries old, embroidered, not with saints and swords, but with quiet moments, a nun with her hand in her sleeve, a whiskered nose peeking out, a silent chuckle in the still of night. Your ferret circles your wrist once, then curls tightly, tail over nose. You blow out the candle. Darkness falls like a blessing.
It's not often that scandal knocks on a convent door. But when it does, it usually involves something ridiculous, like stolen pears, mismatched habits, or in this case, ferret smuggling gone terribly wrong. You're halfway through folding laundry, wool robes, linen veils, the occasional sock that somehow ended up in the font, when you hear it. A shriek, then running footsteps, then another shriek, then silence. Too much silence. You glance at Sister Dymphna, who's clutching a damp tunic and blinking at the wall like she just witnessed something life-changing. You raise an eyebrow. She mouths a single word, kitchen. You're off before the last drop of soap leaves your hands. The kitchen is chaos. Pots overturned, a jug of milk weeping across the floor, and center stage, Sister Agnes, standing on a stool, clutching her skirts as if the floor were on fire. "What happened?" you whisper. She points with a trembling finger, and there it is, a ferret, but not just a ferret, a large one, with attitude, and somehow a sprig of parsley stuck to its back, like a makeshift cloak. It scampers across the table, boldly sniffing the bread rolls as if auditioning for the role of head chef. Turns out, it's not anyone's official ferret, at least not anymore. Whispers swirl in the hours that follow. Someone's borrowed someone else's ferret to sneak into the cheese cellar. It escaped. It has since developed a taste for unsupervised exploration. It may or may not have been trained to unroll cloth to access wrapped food. No one will confess. You're not surprised. Historians still argue whether this kind of episode was the exception or the norm. Some claim convents were bastions of order, where routines ran like clockwork, and no animal dared defy structure. Others suggest the opposite, that under the surface, life buzzed with low-level anarchy, and ferrets were just the most entertaining expression of it. You, having just watched one leap from a cupboard to a flour sack with the elegance of a gymnast, suspect the truth leans toward the latter. The abbess, who had previously turned a blind eye to the ferret situation, is not amused. A stern notice is read at dinner. All creatures not explicitly approved by rule or bishop shall be removed from communal areas, ferrets included. Eyes scan the room. Sleeves tremble. Your ferret nuzzles your ribs as if sensing danger. Later, in the privacy of your cell, you hold it close and whisper, "Well, looks like you've been declared contraband." It sneezes, then bites the end of your blanket in protest. You both sit in silence. The candle burns low. Your ferret eventually curls into a donut shape and sighs itself to sleep. You lean back and think, what now? Some of the nuns are murmuring plans, hidden pockets in robes, secret tunnels between cells. Someone even joked about forming an underground order of the sacred weasel. That one might have been Sister Helena, or you. Hard to say. You don't want to give your ferret up. None of you do.
And maybe that's the scandal, not the ferret itself, but the affection, the insistence on warmth, the unwillingness to let go of the one thing that breaks the monotony with joy. You roll over and let your arm hang off the bed. Your ferret twitches in sleep and presses its nose against your wrist. Tomorrow, someone will suggest a secret pouch sewn into the hem of the choir robes. Tonight, you just listen to the soft breathing of a creature that doesn't care about rules, only rhythm, and maybe snacks. The library is the quietest place in the convent, not just by rule, but by feel. You step inside and everything seems to hold its breath. The air is still thick with the scent of old parchment, beeswax, and something faintly herbal, lavender maybe, from the sachets. The sisters tuck between the scrolls to ward off mold. You tiptoe across the floorboards, which creak anyway. You're not fooling anyone. Your ferret is awake, nose twitching against the inner seam of your sleeve. You whisper a firm no, and it responds by crawling further up your arm like an enthusiastic sock. Today, you've come to search for something, not guidance exactly, at least, not of the spiritual kind. You're looking for evidence, because there's a rumor, a persistent one, that somewhere in the margins of the oldest manuscripts, some forgotten scribe or artist, left a clue. You pull out a thick psalter with a faded leather spine. It groans when opened. The pages are stiff, the ink brown with age, the illuminated letters still glinting with flecks of gold. You scan the borders, vines, doves, more vines. Wait, there, a small creature too long for a squirrel, too sleek for a cat, sniffing at a nun's foot. It's mid-stride, mid-scamper, tongue lolling out in a way that's suspiciously playful. You squint. The tail has a curve to it, a distinctive shape that's ferret-esque. You glance around. No one's looking. You flip the page and find another, a different nun this time, robes flapping dramatically as she chases what appears to be the same ferret. It's holding a scroll in its mouth, or maybe a sausage, hard to tell. Historians still debate whether these illuminations were literal depictions or whimsical embellishments. Some argue they were symbolic, the animals meant to represent temptation, chaos, or even the devil himself. Others claim the monks and nuns just had very long winters and very active imaginations, but you know better. You trace the creature's tiny form with your finger and smile. Someone else saw it too. Someone else thought this little ball of fur mattered enough to include alongside saints and psalms. You turn more pages. A few sheets later, in a manuscript of prayers attributed to Saint Hildegard, you find a curious marginal note in delicate Latin script. Spiritus meos dormit melius, cum mustela calida. Your Latin isn't perfect, but you translate it roughly as my spirit sleeps better with a warm ferret. You blink. That can't be real, but it is. The ink is old, the handwriting formal, and the sentence, strangely honest. You wonder who wrote it. A nun like you, a scribe visiting from another house, a sister who once sat where you're sitting now, her ferret tucked into her lap, purring like a tiny furry hymn. Your own ferret shifts, sniffs the air, and sneezes softly into your sleeve. You whisper you're practically canonized. The afternoon passes like the candle beside you burns down to a stub. The shadows stretch long across the reading desk. You feel like you've found something, not just facts, but a thread, a through line, proof that this quiet bond, this strange companionship, isn't just a passing fancy, it's history. You close the book gently, slide it back into place, and press your hand to the spine once, as if in thanks. Your ferret licks your wrist. On the way out you pass Sister Magda, who's reading with her veil half slipped and a noticeable bump in her shawl. You glance at each other. Neither of you says a word, but you both smile. Tonight, the wind howls around the chapel like it's remembering something it lost. You lie awake in your narrow cot, the straw mattress rustling beneath your shift. Your ferret is tucked under your chin, warm and heavy in the softest way. You stroke its back absent-mindedly, eyes fixed on the ceiling's wooden beams, counting knots in the timber. The storm outside won't let you sleep, but the story you heard earlier, that's what's keeping you truly awake. Sister Margarita told it at supper, not loudly of course, but in the way one might pass along a secret that already knows how to spread. You were sitting 2 places away, and even across bowls of lentils and hard bread, you caught the name, Saint Elfrida. It's an old legend, maybe a joke, maybe not. Historians still argue whether Saint Elfrida ever existed. Some claim she was a local invention, a folk tale stitched into the tapestry of convent life by centuries of repetition. Others suggest her name appears in obscure devotional texts from a remote priory, always alongside the same peculiar phrase, Custos Mustale, the guardian of the ferret. The story goes something like this. Elfrida was a novice, young, quiet, full of more questions than obedient. She'd taken in a ferret that had been injured outside the convent walls, bitten by a crow or fox, or some other creature favored by cruel metaphors. She named it Abelard. She nursed it back to health with breadcrumbs and whispered prayers, and against every rule and every warning, she kept it. They became inseparable. Abelard followed her through the halls, ducked into her robes during prayer, nestled beside her at night like a second heartbeat. Then came the snake, a real one this time. It slithered into the garden on a spring morning, while the sisters were airing their veils. Some say it was an asp, others say it was a miracle of Satan himself. It coiled beneath the rose bush where the abbess liked to meditate. Everyone froze, except Elfrida. She reached into her sleeve and whispered something no one heard. Abelard shot from her robes like a bolt of divine lightning, and lunged at the serpent. In the commotion that followed, screams, prayers, fainting, only 2 things were certain: the snake was gone, and Abelard had saved the abbess's life. From that day forward, the legend says, no one ever questioned the presence of ferrets in that convent again. You smile as the wind rattles the shutters. It's absurd, probably fictional, but part of you wants it to be true, because somewhere deep down, you know what it's like to love something small and troublesome, to risk reprimand for the sake of warmth, to find comfort not in doctrine, but in fur and fangs and the occasional stolen crust of bread. Your ferret stirs now, its little paws pressing against your collarbone like a stretch after a long nap. It opens its mouth in a silent yawn, then nuzzles under your chin. You whisper Abelard. It sneezes, close enough. You lie back and close your eyes. The wind moans, your heart slows, and in the quiet between gusts, you think you hear it again. A whisper passed down the halls of memory. The guardian of the ferret, a saint in sandals, a legend with a twitching nose. Maybe you'll dream of her tonight. Maybe she'll smile and hand you a scrap of cheese.
You're not supposed to laugh in the cloister, or giggle, or snort, or clutch your stomach and wheeze until you can't breathe. But today, all bets are off, because you just witnessed the great cheese heist. It begins innocently enough. A sunny afternoon, a gathering of sisters in the refectory, quietly preparing for the next meal. Spoons clink, bread is sliced. The kitchen smells of leeks and hard cheese, the good kind, saved for feast days or visits from church officials. And there on the corner table sits a small wheel of it, left unattended, unwatched. Glorious. You're carrying linens when it happens. You spot the movement first. A flash of cream fur darting between the table legs, then a tail, then a tiny determined head poking from under Sister Aldegundis's hem. Your ferret. No, wait, not your ferret. This one's slightly larger, and wearing what looks suspiciously like a tiny red ribbon around its neck. Who tied that? Why? The ferret assesses the situation like a professional. It sniffs. It pauses. It launches. With startling precision, it climbs the table leg, reaches the wheel of cheese, and begins dragging it toward the edge. You freeze. Time stops. Somewhere, an angel gasps. It's working. The cheese is moving. It should be impossible. The wheel is 4 times its size, but the ferret does not believe in limits. It believes in dairy. The wheel hits the floor with a thump. The room stills. Sister Winifred turns around just in time to see a ferret disappear beneath the cupboard, dragging half the cheese wheel like a victorious gladiator. A stunned silence falls. Then Sister Thecla snorts, loudly, and the entire room collapses into giggles. Even the abbess, who
who just entered and caught the tail end of the spectacle, doesn't scold anyone. She just sighs, pinches the bridge of her nose, and mutters something about the sins of soft-heartedness. You, meanwhile, are clutching your side. Your ferret, your actual ferret, has emerged from your sleeve to investigate what all the fuss is about. It sniffs the air, catches a whiff of cheese and glares at you like, "Why didn't you think of that?" Historians of course rarely document moments like these. You don't find ferret-led dairy escapades in official convent ledgers, but oral histories, whispers passed down through generations of nuns. They're full of. Sister Perpetua once spoke of a ferret who stole a page of hymns and built a nest with it behind the altar. Sister Agnes claims one bit the bishop's toe during mass. There's even a rumor that a certain priory ran a side operation rooting holy ferrets for selective pest control. Though this is widely regarded as myth, mostly, still these tales survive because they're beloved, because they make the cloister feel alive, because beneath all the solemnity and silence, there is room even here for mischief. And what is mischief, if not a reminder of the human spirit? Or perhaps the ferret spirit. Later that evening, you sneak a slice of that same cheese, what remains of it anyway, and feed it to your companion. It chomps with vigor, tail flicking with satisfaction. You stroke its back and whisper, "You'd never pull a stunt like that, right?" It burps. You take that as a maybe. In your cell that night, the air is thick with quiet. You're still grinning. The cheese was excellent. The memory even better. Somewhere down the hall, someone chuckles in the dark. Maybe they're remembering the look on Sister Winifred's face. Maybe they're imagining a tiny ribboned outlaw, holed up under the pantry with its prize. Maybe they're thinking like you are, that sometimes the holiest moments are the ones that make you laugh. Laundry day in the convent is many things predictable, endless, deeply soggy, but what it's not is peaceful. You stand in the middle of the courtyard, arms deep in a basin of soapy water, surrounded by flapping veils, dripping robes and 3 separate arguments about whose linens were supposed to be soaked first. Sister Euphrasia insists that ranking by seniority is how it's always been done. Sister Cecilia mutters that her sleeves have more mud than dignity. Your ferret, it has zero interest in these politics. It darts between the drying lines like a ghost of mischief. Tail high, paws silent on the worn flagstone. You glance over your shoulder just in time to see it dash beneath a hanging underskirt and vanish like a magician at a village fair. The trouble starts when someone leaves the soap bucket unattended. A moment later, a loud splash. You spin around. Your ferret has discovered the joy of bubbles. It's swimming. Yes, swimming through the suds, looking both thrilled and thoroughly unrepentant. One of the novices shrieks, dropping a pile of wet robes. Sister Margareta gasps and covers her mouth, scandalized. Sister Dymphna just laughs, loudly. You rush over and pull your dripping companion from the bucket. It sneezes once, twice, then shakes violently, spraying foam in every direction. You're soaked. It is smug. You wrap it in a towel and cradle it like a squirmy baby. It chirps happily, having turned an ordinary day of chores into a festival. Historians still debate whether ferrets were considered outright nuisances, or simply unpredictable cohabitants in medieval monasteries. Some monastic rules include vague admonitions against unclean disturbances, which could just as easily refer to mud on sandals as to small creatures in the soap. Others ignore the topic entirely, as if to say if we do not speak of them they do not exist. But they did exist, and they made laundry day memorable. Your ferret snuggles deeper into the towel, now drowsy from its aquatic adventure. You dab at its ears with the corner of a linen napkin, and mutter something about consequences. It yawns. Around you the chaos settles. Robes are rehung. The soap bucket is retrieved. Sister Euphrasia eventually forgives the breach of seniority. But the stories, they'll linger. You can already hear Sister Helena spinning the tale into legend. The day the ferret tried to baptize itself. She'll probably add details about divine foam and angelic chirping. Someone else will claim it sang a hymn. You don't bother correcting anyone. Let the myth grow. Laundry day deserves an ep. That night, as you lay the towel-dried creature into the crook of your arm, you think of all the quiet miracles no one ever wrote down. The giggles between chores, the sun-warmed robes, the small wet nose pressed against your wrist. You drift off with the scent of soap still lingering, and the faintest squirm of a clean, slightly damp ferret curled into your sleeve. If heaven has a laundry room, you hope it's a little bit like this. You're not sure when it started. Maybe it was Sister Helena's ribbon, or the acorn charm that appeared on Sister Winifred's ferret last week, or maybe it was the miniature bell you definitely heard jingling under someone's robe during Vespers. But the truth is undeniable now. Ferret fashion is a thing. Today, as you sit near the herb garden watching the sky turn that soft blue-gray that always smells like mint and dew, your ferret wriggles free of your sleeve and struts proudly into the grass wearing a tiny cloak. You didn't make it. You don't know who did, but it's there. A sliver of soft brown linen, stitched with surprising skill, tied neatly around its shoulders like a noble's cape. The embroidery, yes, embroidery reads Benedictus. Whether that's your ferret's new name or just a joke, no one will admit. Sister Margareta claims she found the fabric in a basket of scraps. Sister Dymphna says she saw someone using a needle under the table last Tempine. Sister Euphrasia is appalled, which of course only encourages everyone. Historians still argue whether medieval monastics engaged in any form of pet ornamentation. Officially, vanity was forbidden, embellishment discouraged, but personal creativity, that often slipped through the cracks. Marginal illustrations show monks doodling bunnies in the corners of gospel pages, nuns writing poetry about birds, and once famously a medieval manuscript depicting a cat wearing a crown. So why not a ferret in a cape? You watch as your tiny crusader explores the herb beds. It pounces on a beetle, rolls in marjoram, nearly topples a pot of rosemary. The cape flaps behind it dramatically in the breeze. Sister Cecilia gives a polite cough from the bench behind you and mutters, "Looks like it's about to charge into battle." You whisper back, "It already has." There's even talk, quiet whispered, entirely unserious talk of forming a guild of Saint Weasel. The seal would feature a paw print, a tail, and perhaps a halo. The motto, Silentium, Mustela, Misericordia, Silence, Ferret, Mercy. You suspect someone's already sketching it into the margins of the convent ledger. Later, in the embroidery corner of the scriptorium, you notice something new on the shared supply shelf. A basket labeled small animal accessory. Inside are bits of felt, ribbon scraps, and 3 acorn buttons. No one claims it, everyone uses it. Even the abbess hasn't commented, which means of course that she knows, and that she approves, silently, discreetly, perhaps unwillingly. You try your hand at making something small, a soft collar lined with threadbare lace, barely visible beneath the fur. It takes you an hour. Your stitches are crooked, your fingers cramp, but when you fasten it around your ferret's neck, and it sniffs you like yes, this will do, you feel oddly proud. There's something deeply human about all this. The effort to care, the desire to adorn, not for display but for connection, to give beauty even to something small, for no reason but affection. That night, as your cloaked companion curls into your sleeve like a retired knight, you wonder what future historians would say if they'd laugh, or roll their eyes, or maybe even understand. Because this too is devotion, not just to God, but to joy, to fur-lined friendship, to the quiet rebellion of love stitched in miniature.
You're in the chapel when the news arrives, whispered between hymns, passed like folded notes between sleeves. Apparently Rome has spoken. Or, written. It's always writing with them. Someone intercepted a letter from a bishop's courier, not addressed to your convent specifically, but close enough to sting. Within its neatly inked lines lies a familiar warning. The keeping of weasels, stoats, or other improper creatures within houses of holy restraint shall be regarded with suspicion, and is discouraged under threat of canonical rebuke. You blink at the word weasels, not ferrets, not specifically, but it's close. Close enough to feel like a slap on the paw. You sit there, hands folded, lips moving through the motions of the next hymn, but your mind is racing. Across the chapel, Sister Helena meets your gaze with wide eyes. Someone else stiffens. You feel the collective clench ripple through the sleeves around the room. Your ferret must sense it too. because it doesn't stir from its hiding place, curled tightly against your ribs like it's trying to disappear. Historians still argue whether this decree scattered across a few regional letters was ever formally enforced. Some claim it was merely symbolic, a moral reminder to avoid attachments. Others insist certain convents were scolded, fined, even investigated. A few radical scholars suggest it was more about control than cleanliness, a crackdown on joy, on autonomy, on furry, twitchy little secrets. Back in your cell you close the door and sit in silence. What would they do, if they knew? Take your ferret, force you to choose. It's absurd, unthinkable, and yet, possible. You pick up a piece of parchment. You're not sure what you mean to write. A confession, a defense, a sermon. Instead, your quill sketches. At first it's just idle doodling. A long body, curious eyes, a tail arched like a question mark. But then your lines become more certain, more deliberate. You add robes, a little halo, a scroll tucked under one paw. You draw Saint Mustela, the patron of silence and chaos, of cloistered mischief, of love too quiet to be allowed. Later you show it to Sister Cassilia. She claps a hand to her mouth and laughs until tears fall. The next morning, the image has been carefully tucked into the corner of the bulletin board near the kitchen. No one claims it, but someone adds a Latin phrase underneath. It mustelle create santa Deo. And ferrets too were created by God. You don't talk about the letter again. It becomes one of those things like the time Sister Gertrude tried to dye her veil with beet juice, that lives in silence, in knowing glances, in the shifting of sleeves. You still take precautions, of course. Fewer ferrets at meals. No more cheese heists. Capes kept under robes. Accessories removed during liturgy. But in the privacy of your cell your ferret remains. Tonight it snuggles close, its breath warm on your skin, its tiny claws flexing in sleep. You whisper, "They don't understand." It twitches. You continue. It's not about defiance. It's about comfort. About having one thing that listens, that doesn't judge, that stays. Your ferret says nothing, which is exactly the point. Outside, the stars scatter like spilled salt across the sky. You pull your blanket tight, tuck your companion in close, and close your eyes to the quiet hum of a world too old and too soft to be entirely obedient. There's something about old journals that makes you feel like a time traveler. This one is barely holding together, its leather cover cracked like dry earth, the parchment inside curling at the edges like leaves before rain. You found it buried in a storage chest in the cloister attic, under a pile of broken hymnals and a chipped statue of Saint Scholastica, with one wing missing from her dove. No name on the spine, no title, just a faded scrap of ribbon poking out like a forgotten bookmark. You sit cross-legged on the cold stone floor, the journal balanced on your lap, your ferret curled into the crook of your knee. It's quiet here, dust motes, dancing in a shaft of morning light like they've been waiting for centuries to be noticed. You open to the first page. The handwriting is neat, but personal, looping in places, occasionally smudged, and the content, not doctrine, not chores, not meditations on sin. It's affection, entry after entry, day after day filled with quiet moments of companionship, between a nun and her ferret. No names are given, just she and my sleeve spirit. She woke early today and chirped at the rain. I think she prefers thunder to silence. My heart feels heavier than usual. I held her close and felt lighter. Is that wrong? She watched me cry and didn't move. Her stillness felt like mercy. You stop reading. Your eyes sting. Historians still argue whether these personal writings, rare and often hidden, were common or extraordinary. Diaries weren't encouraged. Life was meant to be a collective surrender, not an individual record. And yet somehow, this served a window into someone like you, someone who lived under vows, wore scratchy robes, followed the bell, and found comfort in a creature that licked her fingertips and stole her ribbon. As you turn the pages you see sketches too, not elaborate, just simple charcoal outlines. A curled tail, a paw on a prayer book, a heart drawn with 3 small whiskers tucked inside. You find a pressed flower, lavender, and beneath it,
She died this morning. I buried her beneath the rosemary bush. I told no one, but I think the garden knows. You stare at that sentence for a long time. Your ferret shifts now, blinking sleepily, then curling tighter into your lap. You gently rest a hand on its back. Somewhere, behind you, a bell rings for sext, but you don't move, because this moment feels sacred. There's a reason so many of the sisters keep these animals, even when they know they're not supposed to. It's not just pest control. It's not even just the mischief or the shared warmth, or the secret jokes passed down through hidden embroidery and coded sketches. It's the the living, breathing reminder that love, however small, however furry, still exists inside walls built for silence. You close the journal carefully, tuck it into your habit, and whisper, "I'll keep her words safe." Back in your cell that night, you set the book on your shelf, beside your psalter and a half-finished pair of woolen socks. Your ferret is already asleep, paws twitching as it dreams. You stroke its back and think, someday someone might find your notes too. A sketch in the margin, a strange collar folded in a drawer, a smudge of cheese where no cheese should be, and they'll know that you were here, that you loved. The sky is a soft blue-gray this morning, the kind that never really becomes daylight, but isn't quite night anymore either. You stand by the cloister window, watching mist rise from the fields like sleepy thoughts drifting away. Today is your last full day in the convent. No one talks about it directly. Not yet. But the signs are there. Your name quietly removed from the laundry rotation. Your travel bundle leaning against the foot of your cot. Sister Magda, pressing your hand for a few seconds longer than usual after compline. Change moves slowly here, like winter thawing, but it moves. You've packed almost everything. One robe, a psalter, your note, a small length of blue thread, the embroidered collar, but the real question still curls against your side. Warm and breathing, utterly unaware of the outside world that awaits. Your ferret. You haven't told anyone what you'll do. Maybe you don't know yet. Maybe you're waiting for a sign. Maybe the sign is already burrowed inside your sleeve, currently dreaming of soup crumbs and stolen quills. You walk the cloister one last time, trailing your fingers along the cool stone. The others are busy with chores or prayers, or pretending they're not watching you. Sister Dimphna slips you a hard biscuit in passing. Sister Helena winks. Someone, probably Sister Cassilia, has added a tiny sketch of a ferret, wearing a crown to the margin of the notice board. Underneath a scrawl, "Long live the Queen of Pockets." You chuck. Historians may never find these records. The journals, the acorn charms, the tiny stitched capes and absurd cheese crimes. But they happened. You were here, and your story is stitched now into this place, quietly, invisibly, but firmly. The abbess says nothing when you pass her in the chapel, but her gaze lingers on the twitch in your sleeve. Then softly, so low only you can hear, "Keep her warm." You nod. Night comes too quickly. You sit in your cell for the last time. The candle is low, your bag is packed, and your ferret, your companion, your secret, your sleeve spirit, is curled into the crook of your elbow, as it always has been. You whisper, "Ready?" It yawns. You stroke its back one last time and blow out the candle. Wind down. The convent is quiet now, not just with silence, but the kind of hush that settles after the last page has turned, the last ember has faded, and the last soft paw has found its resting place. You lie back. The blanket is just heavy enough to pin you gently to the earth, the room dim enough that edges blur, and thoughts begin to stretch into dreams. Your ferret, warm and curled beneath your hand, breathes in slow, perfect rhythm, rising and falling, like a lullaby you don't remember learning. You think of the lavender bushes swaying in the garden, of Sister Helena's cape sketches, of that stolen wheel of cheese. You remember the bishop's sharp gaze, and the quiet triumph of going unseen. You remember the first time it curled into your sleeve, how strange it felt, and how quickly that strangeness became home. And now the weight of goodbye, light as a feather, rests on your chest. But it's not sad. Not really. Because what you carry now isn't just memories, it's present. A reminder that even in the strictest corners of the world, joy wriggles in, mischief finds a door, affection hides in the folds of wool and prayer. And somewhere, Centuries from now, a reader might stumble on a phrase in a forgotten book, spiritus meus dormit milius cum muste, Kalida, and smile without knowing why. The last candle flickers, the fan hums gently, your muscles melt into the mattress, and your little companion shifts once, sighs, and settles. All is well. All has been well. And somewhere deep in your sleeve, love sleeps.
Next story, boring Greek myths for sleep. What Cerberus ate for breakfast in Haiti. Hey guys, tonight we descend gently into the shadows beneath the earth, where the sun doesn't rise and the air smells faintly of damp stone and pomegranate rinds. You're not exactly dead, but you're definitely not where you left your socks either. Around you, quiet rivers ripple without wind, stone columns stretch upward without end, and the soft crunch of gravel under your sandals reminds you you're somewhere you probably weren't invited. A low growl rumbles nearby. Or maybe it's a yawn. It's hard to tell because what's yawning has 3 heads. That's right. You're here to meet the most misunderstood pupper in Greek mythology, Cerberus. And tonight we're going to find out what he eats for breakfast. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and if you're still awake enough to type, drop your location and local time in the comments. It's always lovely to see where in the world we're dozing off together from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand at the edge of the asphodel meadows, and you can't help but feel a bit awkward. Everyone here is dead, everyone except you. The shades, as they're called, move slowly, murmuring vague memories of life. You pass a man whispering about goats and another raving about taxes he still hasn't paid. It's all very beige. Then you hear it again, that deep rumbling sound. You freeze. Something is breathing behind a massive slab of obsidian shaped like an archway. A nose emerges first, then a head, then 2 more. All 3 are attached to the same hulking body, glistening with fur as black as the Styx. Cerberus, the gatekeeper, the floofy boy of doom. And judging by the way one head is licking its lips, the other is sneezing, and the third is kind of just staring at you like a waiter with no patience. You've interrupted breakfast. Let's be real for a second. You probably wouldn't survive long here. For one thing, they don't serve frappuccinos. For another, this dog is the size of a minivan, and might consider your leg a chew toy. Historians still debate exactly how Cerberus came to guard the underworld. Some say he was born to Typhon and Echidna, the so-called mother of monsters. Others suggest he might have been a metaphor for the boundaries between life and death, a psychological bouncer with extra heads. But right now, he's just a very big boy who hasn't eaten yet. You take a cautious step forward, and Cerberus snorts. What's fascinating is how domesticated he seems, at least compared to the stories. One head blinks sleepily, another lets out a high-pitched sneeze that echoes down the tunnel. The last gives a low whine, tongue lolling lazily out of its mouth. Maybe he's not that different from your neighbor's overfed golden retriever. Except of course for the piles of bones scattered around. One of the more overlooked aspects of Greek mythology is just how much food shows up in these stories. Not always in the ways you expect. Sometimes it's symbolic, sometimes tragic, and occasionally downright hilarious. But in Hades the rules shift. Mortals don't need food here. Spirits drift about, no longer driven by hunger, which begs the question, who's feeding the dog? You spot something in the corner, a bowl. Well, technically, it's a cratered bronze cauldron, bigger than a hot tub, and it's filled with something, charred bones, unidentifiable chunks, a single perfect olive. Cerberus trots over and delicately selects a piece of what looks like slightly rotted boar. Crunch. The sound is moist. You step back. There's a theory, fringe, but compelling, that Cerberus's meals were spiritual offering. When the living performed sacrifices, some of the essence drifted down here, forming this macabre buffet. One mainstream historian even proposed that Cerberus was a kind of divine recycling unit, not so much a monster as a cosmic composter. Of course others say he just eats whatever's available. Hero boots, leftover philosopher sandals, an occasional soul who tried to sneak past without proper paperwork, but that's a story for later. For now Cerberus yawns again, a blast of hot, meaty breath washing over you like a buffet sneeze guard that's given up. And then strangely, he lies down. All 3 heads turn inward,
sharing the last bone like some horrifying spaghetti scene from a Disney film. The clinking of metal on stone fades into the murmur of spirits, the bubbling of the lethe, and the whispering wind that definitely wasn't there a second ago. And just like that, your guide to underworld breakfast is complete. You're not sure if it's the death air or the echoing silence, but your stomach growls. Bad timing. One of Cerberus's heads perks up, maybe the left one, or is that the right one? Hard to tell when they all look mildly annoyed. But instead of lunging, he merely sniffs the breeze, grunts, and goes back to gnawing a tibia. You're safe, for now. Cerberus stretches lazily, his paws raking grooves into the obsidian floor. You watch as the middle head licks the snout of the right one, who promptly sneezes into the left one's eye. An all-out glare fest follows. 3 sets of canine expressions: disdain, resignation, and hunger, all play out at once like a poorly choreographed soap opera. And yet behind the growls and gooey eye contact, you sense a question forming in the air. What exactly does a creature like this eat every day? Well, you're in luck, because today's breakfast is about to be served. From behind a tall basalt column, a figure appears, hooded, small, shuffling. You squint. It's not Hades, and it's definitely not Persephone. No, this person is dragging what looks like a cart of assorted leftovers. You hear bones clink, pots rattle, and something that sounds suspiciously like wet bread sliding off a tray. Meet Melly, the underworld's breakfast run. Now, mainstream mythology has very little to say about the domestic life of Hades. Most people focus on the drama, Persephone's kidnapping, Orpheus's concert gig, that time Heracles tried to walk out with Cerberus as a party trick. But someone has to keep things running down here. You don't get a 3-headed dog that fluffy without at least some grooming and a feeding schedule. Nellie grumbles something about spoiled Hydra spleen and dumps her cart beside the cauldron. Cerberus perks up, tail thudding once, twice, 3 times. The heads move independently. One dives straight for the bones, another investigates a glistening fish head, and the third looks longingly at Nellie's sandals. You've had enough, she mutters, smacking the air with a wooden spoon. It's a strange thing to watch this fearsome guardian of the gates being scolded by someone who smells like old leeks and underworld mildew. But Cerberus obeys. Most fringe scholars, those delightful ones who publish things in journals nobody reads, once argued that Cerberus might have been a metaphor for balance. His breakfast routine, a symbol of control over chaos. Mainstream historians roll their eyes at that, but you can't help noticing the precise order in which he eats: bone, ash, then whatever's been fermented the longest. There's a kind of ritual here. Even in the land of death, breakfast is sacred. And then, you notice something. In the corner of the cart covered with a cloth is a small jar. Melly lifts the lid. Instantly the air fills with a strange smell, something between roasted garlic and moonless despair. All 3 heads free. Melly, seeing your curiosity, leans toward you with a grin that shows way too many molars. Pomegranate paste, she says. Persephone's recipe. You raise your eyebrows, or maybe you don't, hard to tell, since your entire face is stuck in a kind of half-fascinated, half-revolted grimace. Apparently once a season, Persephone sneaks back into the underworld kitchen and whips up a batch of this unholy marmalade. Hades doesn't eat it, spirits can't, but Cerberus loves it. And for good reason. According to one story passed down from ancient temples and at least 3 tipsy historians at a symposium, Persephone believed Cerberus was lonely. After all, he spent eternity at the gate, biting heroes and licking fire, so she gave him flavor, a bit of brightness in the gloom, a reminder that even monsters deserve a little sweetness. It's kind of adorable, until he burps and you smell it again. The underworld, despite its general dreariness, is full of these tiny strange details. Historians still argue whether this reflects actual cultic rituals, or just the human need to humanize monsters, but the fact remains, even the gatekeeper of Hades likes his breakfast served warm. You watch as Cerberus finishes his meal. He licks the inside of the cauldron, accidentally knocks over the fish head, and then flops down dramatically on a bed of crushed amphorae. His stomach's, yes plural, gurgle in surround sound. Nellie wheels her cart away with a sigh. Same time tomorrow, boy. The heads, now drowsy, blink in unison. The middle one hiccups. You consider asking if there's a guest meal available, but then remember you're only visiting. Hopefully. And with that, the underworld's strangest breakfast service comes to a close. Cerberus,
full to the brim with breakfast and whatever else might have wandered into his mouth before sunrise, lets out a low rattling sigh and curls up like a flaming black croissant. One head lays flat on the stone, another rests atop the first, and the third remains upright, blinking slowly as if to say, "I'm not sleepy, you are." You inch away, stepping around a pile of what looks suspiciously like chariot spokes. The air grows thicker, more humid. Behind you the echoes of Melly's cart wheels fade into the gloom. Ahead the walls widen into something you could almost call a courtyard if courtyards came furnished with ghostly willows and puddles of forgotten dream. It's here that you begin to wonder if Cerberus has such a ritualistic breakfast. What about the rest of the underworld? Is everyone secretly nibbling pomegranate toast behind the scenes? Spoiler, not really. Ancient Greek beliefs about the afterlife were at best inconsistent, and at worst a mess of contradictions. In some stories the dead float about like leaflets in a bureaucratic breeze, in others they toil, rest, or even feast, depending on how well they behaved in life. But almost always, the idea of eating in the underworld is portrayed as either forbidden or unnecessary. Yet here you are, watching a dog clean his third set of teeth with a toe bone. One mainstream interpretation holds that the dead don't need sustenance, but divine creatures, being a different order of being altogether, still maintain their appetites. It's not about hunger, really, it's about ritual, habit, comfort. Which brings you to one of the most surreal sights in the realm of Hades. The Lost Pantry. Yes, that's its actual name, or at least the name scratched into the wall in faded Doric script above a cracked stone doorway. You stumble across it by accident, or maybe by fate, because fate down here isn't so much a rule as a series of helpful accidents. Inside, rows of stone shelves curve like ribs along the walls, each holding jars, sacks, and bottles filled with the weirdest food-like objects you've ever not wanted to eat. There are dried fig cakes that hum slightly, a clay pot labeled ambrosia, with a suspicious question mark, several amphora of heroic mead corked shut with beeswax and hairpins. And then there's the olives. You poke one with a stick, it pokes back. This is where Cerberus's food comes from. At least some of it. Apparently the pantry is restocked by offerings from the living, food left at tombs, sacrifices to Hades. Even the crumbs from temple feasts all somehow make their way here, transformed by the journey between worlds into these eerie delicacies. And Cerberus, he's got a nose for it. It's said that every so often he gets bored of the cauldron and goes scavenging. One head leads, the others protest. He'll sniff through cracks in the walls, wander into forgotten catacombs, and once famously barged into Hypnos's dream vault by mistake, where he spent an entire day chewing on a sleep incantation. He slept for 3 weeks after that. A fringe theory, because of course there is, suggests that Cerberus isn't just a guardian, but a kind of cosmic filtration system. By eating food from the mortal world, he grounds the energy, keeps balance in the underworld, and prevents spiritual indigestion across the realm. It's a bit abstract, yes, but hey, you're in a place where ghost trees hum lullabies. Anything's possible. As you tiptoe past a shelf of whispering pickled grapes, you hear a familiar snuffling behind you. Cerberus has followed you, well, part of him. One head peers around the doorway, tongue lolling. He's still hungry. You gesture toward the pantry. Help yourself. He does, delicately, absurdly gently for a creature with a jaw strength equal to an avalanche. He selects what looks like a petrified pear, and begins gnawing. The other heads follow, trailing behind like shy toddlers. It's surprisingly peaceful. You lean against the cool stone wall and watch as the most fearsome dog in mythology selects his second breakfast with all the care of a sommelier sniffing wine. And for a moment, just a moment, you forget that you're surrounded by the dead. Because somehow in this pantry carved from shadow and myth, breakfast still matters.
Cerberus finishes the last bite of his rock-hard fruit, gives a satisfied huff from his leftmost head, and slumps onto the floor, with the grace of a collapsing mountain. Dust puffs up from his fur as his middle head lets out a long, wheezy yawn that rattles the jars on the shelves. You almost feel like clapping. He's managed to make a pantry raid look dignified. The third head, though, it's watching you, quietly, intently. You're not sure if it's curious or calculating breakfast part 3. To distract yourself, you take a slow stroll around the room, noting the stranger items tucked among the foodstuffs.
There's a bundle of scrolls tied with twine labeled funeral spices, a jar of something that pulses softly, and a bowl of what might be pebbles or chickpeas. You don't ask. It makes you wonder if Cerberus dines like this now. What used to be on the menu? Back in the land of the living, dogs in ancient Greece were considered noble beasts, sometimes even sacred. They guarded homes, accompanied hunters, and were even sacrificed during certain rites. A fact that raises a rather grim question. Did Cerberus ever get a taste for other dogs? Mainstream historians prefer not to answer. The topic tends to ruin conferences, but one dusty scroll discovered in a collapsed storeroom beneath Delphi describes a curious ritual involving honeyed barley cakes shaped like puppies. Apparently these were left at tombs and temple altars to appease Hecate and the Hound of the Gate. Were they treats, warnings, decoys? Fringe archaeologists suggest the cakes may have made their way into Cerberus's pantry, crumbled and refashioned over centuries into the stale, chalky biscuits you now see stacked neatly near the olives. You try one, instantly regret it. It tastes like guilt and cinnamon. Cerberus, however, seems to enjoy them. He crunches through a whole stack, crumbs flying, one head attempting to steal from another. You start to see a pattern. He doesn't just eat, he negotiates with himself over every bite. One head goes savory, the other prefers sweet, and the third just wants to lick the plates clean. It's a surprisingly relatable breakfast dynamic. What's also clear is that breakfast in the underworld is less about nourishment and more about comfort. Here even monsters need routines, rituals, rhythms, and Cerberus has his down to a science. The soft clink of clayware draws your attention to a far corner of the pantry, where a narrow alcove contains a small stone basin. Above it, inscribed in neat Ionic script, is the word ablution. You watch as Cerberus, two of the three heads, lumber toward it. What follows is a surprisingly graceful ritual. Each head dips low, drinks from the basin, and then sneezes with such force that one of the jars topples from its shelf. The third head, apparently offended by the splash, sulks. You chuckle. Maybe this is why so many ancient sources tried to downplay Cerberus's personality. It's hard to fear a beast who throws tantrums over wet food. A particularly quirky tidbit from a 3rd century poet claims that Persephone once commissioned a silver feeding bowl for Cerberus, engraved with scenes of heroes not getting past him. Hades was reportedly less amused, muttering something about encouraging bad behavior. That bowl, if it ever existed, isn't in the pantry, but it would have made a great centerpiece. Meanwhile, you notice something odd. Cerberus is still chewing, but there's nothing in his mouth. Ghost treats, phantom leftovers, or just pure habit. Historians still argue whether this behavior is a divine tic or symbolic repetition. Either way, it's mesmerizing, like watching a very large, very furry metronome with dental needs. Eventually Cerberus slows, his breathing deep. All three heads blink at different speeds, an unnerving sight if you're not ready for it. And then slowly his massive body sinks down once more onto the cool stone floor. It's not quite sleep, more like post-breakfast contentment. And you're oddly at peace. The pantry, for all its strangeness, has a stillness to it, a hum, a sense that for at least a few moments each day, even the most fearsome creature in the underworld gets to stop guarding the gates and just enjoy a meal. Cerberus's left head lets out a soft, gurgling snore, the kind of snore that flutters loose bits of parchment off the shelves and sends a ripple through the ghostly willows just outside the pantry archway. You lean against a column and listen. 3 snores in slightly staggered harmony. It's like an off-key wind ensemble made entirely of stomachs and nasal passages, and it's comforting. You let yourself ease into the rhythm of this place. After all, you've survived the main breakfast wait. No heroic combat, no fire-breathing dramatics, just one very full, very tired guardian settling in for a digestive nap. But not for long, because from the corridor comes a sound unlike any you've heard so far. The dull slap of sandals and the wheeze of someone carrying far too many amphorae at once. You peek around the archway and there he is, Charon, ferryman of the river Styx,
balancing 6 jugs of what looks like river water tea and muttering under his breath about bloody dog breakfasts and reimbursement forms. He stops when he sees you. "What?" he grumbles. "You think ferrying is a full-time gig?" He drops 1 amphora with a thud that echoes like a funeral drum. It turns out that while Charon is famously known for transporting souls across the Styx, he also doubles as part-time courier, occasional gossip and unofficial underworld food critic. He eyes the empty cauldron with disapproval. "Fed him that goat bone stew again, didn't they?" he muttered. "One of these days that mutt's gonna bring down the whole North Corridor with a burp." Charon flops down next to a nearby urn and uncorks a jug with the sort of resigned elegance only a man who's been rowing the dead for eternity can manage. He pours himself a cup, the liquid black as soot and smelling faintly of licorice and damp regret. You ask him half-joking if he's ever tried feeding Cerberus anything different. "Oh sure," he says taking a sip. "Once brought him a loaf from Elysium. Artisan stuff, olive, thyme baked under a sunset breeze. Thought he'd love it." You raise your eyebrows. He sneezed on it, buried it under a pile of skeleton keys and then licked a torch for 5 minutes. You nod, pretending that story makes perfect sense. According to one fringe tale, Charon once attempted to train Cerberus to fetch fallen oars. The result? 3 splintered boats, a traumatized specter and a stern letter from Hades, filed under Cerberus. "Do not touch." Charon still insists it almost worked. Mainstream mythology barely mentions Charon outside of his ferry duties, but this version, the behind-the-scenes operator with a taste for sarcasm and a deep disdain for overcooked hero bones, is quickly becoming your favorite. He stands again, brushes ghost dust off his robe and gives Cerberus a sideways glance. Well, he's out cold. If he so much as twitches, hit him with a pomegranate rind. Works better than shout. With that he lumbers off down the corridor, jug sloshing, muttering something about inventory forms in triplicate. Cerberus stirs slightly at the sound, then lets out a wet sneeze that echoes like a soggy trumpet. One head burps quietly, another licks its nose, the third is already back to sleep. You sit again and think, there's something quietly noble about all this. The rituals, the unexpected coworkers, the completely unnecessary but somehow essential breakfast habits of a dog who guards the boundary between life and death. Historians still debate if Cerberus was meant to be feared or pitied, or simply understood as the metaphorical embodiment of boundaries. But today he's just a sleepy beast full of barley cakes, goat stew and philosophical headbutts. And you're part of it now, at least for a while. The air hums again as if the walls themselves are sighing. You close your eyes, just for a second. Cerberus snores softly beside you. The pantry glows dimly. Somewhere far above sunlight hits marble, but down here it's always breakfast o'clock. You awaken not with a start, but with the slow syrupy return of consciousness that comes from dozing off in a warm patch of sunlight. Except of course there is no sun down here, just the gentle heat of a sleeping Cerberus, radiating from his enormous triple-flanked torso like a mythological space heater. All 3 heads are at rest. One has a paw draped over a cracked amphora like a teddy. Another is twitching gently, possibly dreaming of chasing something slow and crunchy. The third, snoring again, still the loudest. You sit up, bones cracking like ancient scrolls unrolling and stretch. Around you the pantry has settled into a kind of dusty quiet. The whispering olives have gone still. The ghost figs emit only the faintest hum. And then, just as you're considering another nap, a gentle clang echoes down the corridor. A figure enters, slow and composed. A tall woman in layered robes the color of dusk and ash. Her sandals are silent. Her presence is not Persephone. You blink, not because you didn't expect her, but because, well, she's glowing slightly. Not in a dramatic neon way, more like moonlight on wet marble. She gives Cerberus a long, fond look and then glances toward you. "Did he try to share breakfast?" she asks, her voice smooth as river stones. You nod. Sheepishly, "He drooled on me. Does that count?" She smiles, the kind of smile that suggests she's used to dealing with unpredictable creatures. Some of them dogs, some of them husbands, most of them dead. Persephone kneels beside the cauldron, and pulls something from the folds of her robe. A small jar stoppered with wax, and tied with a strand of dark red thread. You recognize it immediately. The pomegranate paste, the treat Cerberus goes nuts for. He forgets where I hide these. She murmured, it's become our little game. You watch as she opens the jar and places a small dollop on a flat stone dish. The scent is instant and indescribable, like fruit and fire and the first cold morning of autumn. Cerberus stirs, a single tail thud, a sleepy groan, then 3 noses rise, twitching in unison. What happens next is ballet. Cerberus rises, one paw at a time, all heads stretching at slightly different angles. They approach the dish like monks approaching a holy relic, and then with the reverence of a priest tasting sacred wine they lift. One head moans softly, the other 2 nod in agreement. You blink again, because yes, a dog just nodded. Only once a week, Persephone says, standing. Any more and he gets clingy. There's a long pause. You clear your throat. Is that why he once followed Orpheus to the gate? Persephone's smile tightens. Among other reasons, a fringe theory, one with just enough footnotes to seem plausible, claims that Cerberus became more than a guard dog over the centuries, that exposure to divine foods like pomegranate essence changed him, gave him layers, dreamtons, perhaps even a sense of time. Mainstream scholars scoff. It's a dog, they say, albeit a monstrous one. But here, watching him savor a teaspoon of god fruit like it's a rare vintage, it's hard not to believe he's something more. Persephone glides toward the shelves, inspecting jars with the same focus you might give a grocery list written in riddle form. She pulls down one marked ash of laurel bread and another labeled fermented boar air. These will do, she says softly. You raise an eyebrow. New recipes? She nods. Cerberus gets bored easily. She glances back at him. So do I. And just like that she's gone, disappearing into the corridor with jars in hand and the quiet grace of someone who commands both death and springtime without needing to raise her voice. Cerberus finishes the dish, all 3 tongues lapping the last sticky traces. Then he sighs, stretches once more and returns to his familiar coil beside the cauldron. This time he looks at you, and if you didn't know better you'd say he's smiling.
You stare back at Cerberus, and for a few long seconds, it really does feel like you're sharing a moment. A weird, mythologically charged moment, with a 3-headed dog in a pantry full of ghost fruit. One head sneezes, another yawns, and the third blinks at you with something approaching affection or indigestion. You decide to take it as a win. Eventually Cerberus lays back down with a thump that sends a thin puff of ash floating upward. The pantry returns to its low, dreamy hum. You're about to drift off again, when a distant clattering from down the corridor rouses both you and the dog. The clattering gets louder, then louder still, then bursting into the pantry like a child who just learned about sound. Come the Furies. All 3 of them, also known as the Uranias. These spirits of vengeance are not exactly who you'd invite to brunch. But apparently they don't care about social norms. They're here, they're armed, and they're bickering. I told you it was today, hisses one, her snakes hissing right along with her. No, you said it was last week, snaps the second, wings twitching in annoyance. The third says nothing, just gestures dramatically toward the pantry with a clawed finger. In their arms, bundles, wrapped parcels, bowls with steaming content. One even has a small bouquet of what appears to be underworld thyme. You're not sure if they're here to cook or poison, or compete in an infernal bake-off. Cerberus perks up, of course. His ears rise. All 3 noses twitch wildly. He trots forward, tail swinging like a pendulum of pure glee. Apparently this is a regular thing. See, here's what the scrolls don't tell you. The Furies adore Cerberus. Not in the cuddle and coo kind of way. More like how your 3 aunts who always wear black velvet and have a thing for taxidermy might spoil a family cat. With intensity, with competition, and with far too many baked goods. Each one rushes to present her offering. The first reveals a chunk of burnt honey bread. To keep his coat shiny, she declares proudly. The second uncovers a bowl of black bean and blood pudding. For bone strength, she insists. The third simply pours out a jar of glittering dust and says, cryptically, for remembering things that never happened. Cerberus, not one to judge, samples them all, enthusiastically.
His left head chomps into the bread like a sugar-starved lumberjack. The right gulps down the pudding and lets out a burp so deep it echoes into Tartarus. The middle head sniffs the glittery dust, sneezes and visibly shivers. It is frankly adorable. You're sitting in the corner now, not even pretending to be useful, just watching this fever dream of a breakfast club unfold. The Furies fuss. They pet his ears, all 6 of them, comb his fur with obsidian combs, and argue loudly over whether he prefers warm offerings or room temperature. One even tries to sing a lullaby, which Cerberus tolerates until she hits a high note, prompting a synchronized sneeze from all 3 heads. According to a little-known 4th century scholar named Epimenides the Sleepy, yes, really, the Furies were once caretakers of all underworld creatures, not just punishers of mortal guilt. The idea that they take time to dote on Cerberus might have been part of an older cultic tradition, one that worshipped balance and protection as much as retribution. Mainstream scholars roll their eyes at this, of course, but if you ask the dog currently licking pudding off a Fury's boot, he'd probably say it checks out. Eventually the gifts are eaten, the wings are refolded, and the Furies prepare to leave, but not before giving you 3 separate warnings about keeping Cerberus hydrated, entertained and most ominously emotionally validated. Then, with a swirl of feathers and fury, they vanish down the corridor in a cloud of sandalwood and regret. Cerberus sighs again. He's full. He's pampered. He might even be glowing a little. The pantry once again returns to its quiet thrum. You lean back and exhale. The Furies bake. The dead whisper. The pantry hums. And breakfast in the underworld, it rolls on with all the chaos and tenderness of a dream no one's quite ready to wake from. You're still recovering from the Fury whirlwind, half convinced you imagined it when Cerberus plods back over to his familiar sprawl near the cauldron. This time he moves with a kind of grand satisfaction, like a beast that knows it is not merely feared, but adored. One head lets out a long, slow belch. You instinctively hold your breath. The air ripples slightly, like the underworld itself just sighed through a kazoo, and then, like a badly timed sitcom entrance, the mood shifts again, because now, Hades arrives. There's no fanfare, no chorus of howling shades or thunderclaps. He simply is, stepping into the pantry like he owns the place, which, to be fair, he does. His robe is the color of wilted midnight, his crown more like a headband of dark iron than anything flashy. He looks tired, not in a bad night's sleep kind of way, more like someone who has been perpetually awake since time forgot to set an alarm. He surveys the room, crumbs, bones, paw prints and what might be pudding on the ceiling, and frowns. Again, he mutters, pinching the bridge of his nose. Cerberus rolls over, exposing his belly, which all 3 heads begin to lick with total indifference. Hades sighs the way overworked managers sigh when the copier jams for the 4th time that morning. He sees you. Well, you're not dead, he says, voice flat. You shrug. Just visiting. He walks over to a shelf, picks up a cracked jar labeled emergency nectar, sniffs it, and sets it down without comment. Now, if you're expecting some booming declaration from the king of the dead, prepare to be underwhelmed. Hades is not Zeus. He's not even Ares. He doesn't raise his voice. He just exists, like gravity or taxes, inevitable, annoyed, dignified. But when it comes to Cerberus, he softens, a little. He walks over to the curled-up beast, leans down, and gently scratches behind one of the left ears. Cerberus thumps his tail twice. Slow, sleepy approval. He's impossible, Hades mutters. But you like him, you say before you can stop yourself. Hades gives you a look. He's the only one down here who doesn't lie. It's an answer that's both obvious and deeply cryptic. Very underworld. Then, with barely a pause, Hades launches into what appears to be a full breakfast critique. Apparently the barley biscuits are too salty, the pudding not regulated by any health standard, and the pomegranate paste distracting from his duty. And yet, for all his grumbling, he never raises his voice. He even mutters a reminder to himself to have someone reinforce the pantry shelves before next equinox. Here's the thing about Hades. The myths often miss his quieter side. Historians still argue whether he was truly cold or simply introverted, whether he ruled by fear or by fatigue.
But seeing him now gently brushing crumbs off Cerberus's snout while grumbling about pudding rations, you begin to suspect that ruler of the dead is only part of the job. Caretaker of the awkward, the eternal, the beloved beast, that's the real overtime. Before he leaves, he turns back to you. Don't give him anything with raisins, he says gravely. Last time we had ghost diarrhea in the Elysian fields. Noted. With that, he's gone, vanished into a thin slit of shadow that wasn't there a moment ago. Cerberus rolls back upright, blinks, and lets out a low, slow boof, the kind of sound that says, "I told you he was chill." The pantry falls quiet again, for real this time. Just you, a very full dog, and the distant memory of pudding crimes past. You can't help but smile. In a realm where everything is supposed to be solemn and severe, there's something deeply comforting about a ruler who complains about breakfast, and a dog who drools on divine floor. And as Cerberus licks a stray smear of glitter from his paw, you realize this strange, chaotic morning might just be the coziest one you've ever had. The pantry now feels like a quiet pocket stitched into the fabric of the underworld, part storage room, part sanctuary, part absurd breakfast lounge. You lie back resting against a half-empty sack of ash-dusted grain, and let your mind drift. Cerberus curls up beside you again, this time nestling all three heads, like an overly warm, slightly slobbery nest of puppies with attitude. Just as you begin to settle, you hear humming, not the eerie, bone-chilling no, this is the off-key, pot-banging sort of humming that precedes something very not quiet. And around the corner comes one of the lesser-known figures of Hades's staff, Spongia, unofficially titled the Keeper of Cleaning Spirits, and by her own proclamation, the Pantry Purifier. She wears a tunic, several shades paler than clean, a bandana tied crookedly atop her head, and carries a mop that has clearly seen unspeakable horrors. She sees you. She sees Cerberus. She sees the absolute wreckage of bones, crumbs, pudding splashes, and one now shattered amphora still leaking ghostly vapors. Her eye twitches. Cerberus, well-fed and emotionally fulfilled, has no regrets. He stretches. He yawns. One head belches. Another licks Spongia's mop in greeting. She sighs. Every single morning. Now, history tends to ignore underworld janitors, but according to an obscure fragment from a temple inscription in Boeotia, there was once a minor goddess tasked with restoring spiritual hygiene across realms. Some believe Spongia is a surviving echo of that role, eternally assigned to mop what no mortal broom dares touch. Fringe academics even argue she invented the first divine disinfectant, a blend of Styx water and crushed laurel leaves. The fumes reportedly erased memories of how the mess got there in the first place. Mainstream scholars, of course, attribute this to faulty plumbing and sleep deprivation. As Spongia sets to work muttering about fermented fur crumbs, you helpfully lift your feet to let her sweep beneath you. Cerberus tries to help. Really, he noses one of the bone piles into a more compact mound. But then a sneaky ghost fig rolls free, and well, we're back to three heads chasing one cursed fruit across the room. You sigh. Spongia groans. The fig explodes in a puff of regret and clove. Eventually, the chaos subsides. Cerberus resumes loaf formation. Spongia wipes her brow and glares at a patch of pudding that refuses to obey the laws of physics. You offer her one of the cleaner olives. She declines. You think this is bad, she says, pausing mid-mop. You should see what he did during the Saturnalia feast. You raise an eyebrow. Oh yes, someone thought it'd be cute to bake an underworld-themed cake with 12 flavors, one for each hour of death. You nod slowly. He ate the whole thing in 6 seconds. We're still finding frosting in the fields of punishment. Cerberus sneezes in agreement. Despite her grumbling, Spongia pats one of his shoulders before leaving. Good boy, she mutters, and disappears down the corridor, mop trailing. The moment she's gone, Cerberus perks up. All three heads swivel slowly in your direction, with the mischievous glee of a dog who just realized no one's watching. And then he pounces gently on a sack of powdered ghost bread and promptly rolls in it like a toddler in flour. You can't help it. You laugh. It echoes off the pantry walls, bounces off urns and shelves, and for the first time since entering the underworld it doesn't sound hollow. It sounds warm. Cerberus, now powdered in white and wheezing with tail-thumping joy, lets out a small bark from each head, which in this space somehow translates to "Did you see that?" Nailed it. Historians still argue whether this dog was purely mythic, or a psychological construct for ancient fear. But lying here covered in crumbs and haunted flour, you suspect the truth is more mundane and more profound. Cerberus isn't just a guardian, he's a dog. A weird, overachieving, monstrous pudding-eating dog. And down here, that's exactly what he needs to be.
After the flour settles, literally and metaphorically, you brush ghost-bred dust from your shoulders and try to catch your breath. Cerberus, now resembling an enormous powdered donut with tails and teeth, pants happily beside you. His left head gives your knee a casual nudge. The right one starts licking its own nose, managing to get flour on its eyelids. The middle head stares at you, wide-eyed and slightly cross-eyed, as if daring you to judge his new look. You give him a thumbs up. He's clearly proud of himself. And just when you think the pantry couldn't possibly offer more surprises, there's a distant clang, followed by footsteps. Not the soft shuffling of Spongia, or the stately glide of Persephone. No, these are heavy, armored, and suspiciously enthusiastic. A figure bursts in, sword at the hip, shield on back, tunic slightly singed. Heracles, you don't even have time to react before he bellows, "Where's the dog?" Cerberus jolts upright. All three heads growl in harmony, like an ancient harmony written for brass instruments and thunder. Flour puffs into the air dramatically. Heracles sees you. "Ah," he says, squinting. "You must be the other intern." You blink. "The what now?" "I'm here to collect him. Trial stuff. Labors. Long story." You blink again. "You. What?" Again. Turns out, this isn't the famous time Heracles dragged Cerberus to the surface, as part of his 12 labors. No, this is a much lesser-known footnote, one that barely makes it into mythology textbook. Historians still debate whether it ever really happened, citing contradictions in vase paintings, and a suspicious number of missing amphorae. But fringe scholars insist that Heracles returned at least once more, not to capture Cerberus, but to apologize. Apparently the first kidnapping left the poor beast with a temporary limp in one head, and a permanent dislike of leather armor. You glance at Cerberus now. Sure enough, one head has already narrowed its eyes at the demigod, another is softly growling, and the third is slowly raising its jowls in what might be a smile or a calculated bluff. Heracles drops to one knee, arms wide. "Cerby, old friend, still mad about the chains, huh?" Cerberus does not answer. "Fair, fair. I brought biscuits this time." From a pouch at his belt, Heracles pulls a handful of charred, oversized dog treats, shaped like lightning bolts. Each one smells like burnt cinnamon and hubris. The room holds its breath. Cerberus sniffs the air. One head grumbles. The second licks its lips. The third sneezes. Then, like a judge weighing divine testimony, Cerberus gently takes the biscuits, one at a time, crunching them with exaggerated slowness, as if to say, "We're not cool yet, but I'll allow it." Heracles grins, swanding. He sits beside you on a sack of flour. He's gotten fluffier, he says, brushing white dust off his greaves. "He's had a good morning," you offer. A beat passes. Heracles nods. Honestly, he deserves it. The moment is oddly calm. A demigod, a monstrous hound, a mortal intern, all sitting in a pantry that smells like roasted bone and enchanted thyme. You half expect a laugh track. Heracles sighs. "You know, I've fought hydras, lions, titans, but Cerberus, he's the only one who still haunts my dreams. In a good way." You glance at it. "One head brought me a stick once. I cried for 3 days." A fringe theory suggests that Cerberus, once removed from the underworld, briefly tried to behave like a regular dog. Dug holes, chased shadows, buried thunderbolts in Mount Parnassus. Heracles, it seems, saw something more than a mythic beast. He saw potential, loyalty, the eternal good boy beneath the terror. Eventually Heracles rises. "Well, I've made my peace." He gives Cerberus a gentle pat. Cerberus grumbles but doesn't object. Then with a wave, the demigod walks out, boots echoing, cloak billowing, trailing biscuit crumbs and legend.
Cerberus returns to his spot, triumphant, tail wag, not in excitement, but in that quiet, satisfied rhythm of someone who's earned exactly what he wanted. Snacks, respect, and no unnecessary leashing. You give him a knowing nod. He gives you one back. Or maybe he's just blinking. Either way, you both understand. In the underworld, breakfast is never just breakfast. The silence that follows Heracles' departure is deeper than before. Not heavy, not ominous, just cozy, like the hush that settles over a house once the guests leave, and the dog finally gets the couch all to himself. Cerberus, triumphant in both myth and munching, lets out a long, slow groan, and rolls onto his side. Flour still clings to the folds of his fur, giving him the air of an ancient pastry left to cool on an obsidian baking tray. You can almost see steam rising. You're tempted to nickname him Cerberol. You resist. Barely. You glance around at the aftermath. Broken jars, gnawed bones, a single olive still rolling in lazy circles, and in the middle of it all, the good boy himself, snoring in triplicate. But your peace doesn't last long. From the dim corridor beyond, another figure emerges. A tall, statuesque woman in a moon-colored cloak. Her face is pale and quiet, her hands hidden in her sleeves. A silver pendant, shaped like a crossroads, hangs from her neck. You don't need anyone to tell you this is Heki, goddess of magic, thresholds and slightly alarming snap. She walks into the room like mist on the surface of deep water, graceful, slow, and utterly impossible to ignore. Cerberus doesn't move, but one ear perks. Two of his heads twitch. The third continues snoring. Heki kneels beside him and produces a small pouch from her cloak. She opens it, and the scent that spills out is unlike anything you've smelled so far. Wood smoke, anise, crushed sage, and something else. Something bright and ancient. Cerberus sniffs. Instantly, all three heads lift, eyes alert. They know this smell. Enchanted kibble, Heki murmurs, infused with dreams of fields and stars. You blink. You make dog treats. I make rituals, she says simply, and Cerberus deserves his share. She places 3 small discs, flat, dark, rune-etched, into a shallow stone bowl. Each glows faintly, pulsing in time with some distant heartbeat you feel more than hear. Cerberus doesn't gobble these like the others. No, he approaches with reverence. One head eats slowly, the second chews even slower. The third merely holds the last treat in its mouth, staring into space, as if receiving a vision. Heki rises, brushing dust from her robe. He's dreaming now, she says, voice like water sliding down a cavern wall, of places that never were, but should have been. You tilt your head, like grassy meadows and chew toys? She smiles faintly, something like that. Here's the thing, Heki doesn't just deal in magic, she deals in crossroads, decisions, the in-between. It makes sense that she and Cerberus share a bond. Both are liminal, both stand between worlds, both carry the weight of boundaries. One fringe scholar from Thessaly once suggested that Cerberus was Heki's familiar before he became Hades's gatekeeper. The theory was dismissed by most, citing poetic overreach, but looking at them now, you see the truth in it. Their connection isn't loud, it's built on ancient silence. I only come on Wednesdays, she says, half to you, half to no one, and only after the second moonrise. Of course, you say. Nodding like that makes any kind of calendar sense. Before she leaves, she leans down to whisper something into Cerberus's left ear. You don't hear it, you're not meant to, but whatever it is, all three heads sigh in perfect unison, and then she's gone, melted back into shadow. Cerberus finishes the last treat, slow and thoughtful. You sit beside him, unsure if you just witnessed a feeding, or a sacred rite, maybe both. The pantry feels different now, quieter, more whole, and for the first time since arriving, you realize this place isn't just a kitchen, it's a temple, a place where offerings are made, rituals unfold, and a 3-headed dog feared by all, is fed with love. The silence lingers like incense, thick and warm, wrapping the pantry in a gentle stillness. You sit there, back against a jar labeled snail honey, possibly cursed, watching Cerberus doze again, now with an almost celestial glow about him. The enchanted kibble must be doing its work. His heads twitch occasionally, as if chasing stars instead of bones.
You wonder what a dog dreams about when he's the only creature allowed to nap on the edge of oblivion. Suddenly, from behind a low stack of barley sacks, comes a clink and a shuffle. A tiny hand pokes out, dragging what looks like a frying pan carved from polished obsidian. A small skeletal figure with an oversized chef's hat peeks out. You blink, he blinks back, and then he says, with remarkable cheer, This is Pelos, the underworld's least threatening cook, standing at a proud 12 inches tall, 20 with the hat. He's what scholars would classify as an accidental myth. No official myths mention him. No temples were built, but a few scratched lines on the back of a Mycenaean tablet describe the bone boy who stirs the pots of shadows. Fringe historians adore him. Pelos hops onto a cracked stool and begins organizing ingredients. Batwing beans, fermented fennel, spectral lentils, and a handful of suspiciously normal carrots. His tools are equally mismatched. One ladle carved from river bone, one fork made of bronze lightning, and a whisk that's definitely part of a lyre. You watch in fascination as he works, humming off-key the entire time. Cerberus, still half asleep, lifts a head and gives Pelos a low approving rumble. He likes you, you say. Only since I stopped oversalting the dream broth, Pelos says brightly, tossing a lentil with perfect form. 3 heads, 3 palates. Took me decades to figure it out. One mainstream mythologist once proposed that Cerberus's heads represented more than just extra jaws. They could symbolize the 3 parts of the soul: mind, memory and instinct. Pelos, surprisingly, seems to understand this intuitively. He portions food accordingly. 1 dish spicy, 1 sweet, and 1 so bland it might as well be boiled fog. You help, mostly by moving things out of the way. A smoky essence bottle, a pile of wishbones, a scroll that reads "Do not add garlic again" in 4 angry scripts. The air fills with scent, not the thick heaviness of breakfast, but something lighter, herbal. You're starting to feel hungry, which is strange, because you're not supposed to feel that down here. The underworld isn't exactly known for its brunch options. Pelos notices your sniff. Want a bite? He offers, handing you a small sizzling cake the size of a thumbprint. You hesitate, then bite. The flavor is impossible, not delicious in the way mortal food is. This tastes like childhood memory, or a dream you forgot and just remembered mid-chew. Warm, soft, slightly peppery. Cerberus lifts all 3 heads now, intrigued. Relax, Pelos says. Yours is meatless, his isn't. Cerberus gets a triple portion of something that sizzles, crackles, and briefly floats before settling into the bowl like a well-trained ghost. Each head takes a bite. Each tail wags once. You realize this meal too is a ritual, not as showy as Hecate's, not as dramatic as the Furies, but just as important. In a world where everything echoes and eternity stretches long and strange, small comforts matter. A hot meal, a familiar hand, a bone stirred with care. Historians still argue if underworld figures like Pelos were ever meant to be real, but you're watching one now, scraping burnt fig from a pan with a song in his hollow skull and a dog drooling next to him with delight. Reality, it turns out, isn't a requirement down here. Heart is. And Pelos, he has plenty. As lunch winds down, Cerberus lets out a sigh deep enough to rattle the shelf of pickled ambrosia peels. He licks his chops and rests one paw over the empty bowl. Pelos wipes his hands, dusts off his hat and bows. Same time tomorrow, big guy. And to you with a wink. Don't forget to soak the pans in Lethe water. Cuts the grease. You nod. Noted. He vanishes between the sacks again, whistling. You and Cerberus are alone once more, full-bellied, soul-fed, quiet, and somewhere between breakfast and eternity you begin to feel like maybe, just maybe, you belong here too.
The smell of ghost lentils still lingers in the air as you lean back, watching Cerberus enter what can only be described as a post-lunch trance. His left head nods sleepily. The right begins licking its own elbow, and the middle, eyes, half closed, possibly composing poetry about fennel in its head. It's peaceful, until someone knocks. Yes, knocks. On the wall. You freeze. Cerberus lifts his heads like a triple periscope. The knock comes again. 3 soft, evenly spaced raps against the stone wall near the pantry's back corner. Then, without any visible mechanism or hinge, A narrow square door swings inward, with a creak that sounds suspiciously like a question mark. Out steps a woman in crimson robes, her arms stacked with scrolls, ink-stained fingers, and a quill tucked behind one ear. Her name, as she briskly introduces herself, is Palaxo, archivist of Hades and chief librarian of underworld administrative myth reconciliation. In short, she's here for Cerberus's paperwork. Cerberus groans. Palaxo doesn't flinch. Yes, we all groan. Now let's get this over with. She unrolls a scroll nearly your height, revealing rows of paw prints, underworld patrol logs, and at least 3 footnotes about unauthorized nap breaks near the fields of Asphodade. She clicks her tongue, glancing at the dog, Cerberus. She begins in the tone of someone who has delivered many overdue notices. You are once again 3 weeks behind on tailwag quotas at the Gate of Sorrows. Additionally, there is still no signature confirming receipt of the musical bones from Orpheus's last visit. And may I remind you, snacks taken from pantry reserves must be logged. Cerberus's middle head yawns. Don't yawn at me. The left head barks. No sass either. The right head tries to look innocent. It doesn't work. Palaxo sighs and turns to you, assistant, witness, maybe. Can you confirm he's been on duty? You hesitate. Well, he, sort of supervised breakfast. She raises one eyebrow. Sort of. You nod. All 3 heads were awake at once. She considers. Acceptable. With a swish of her quill, she makes a series of cryptic marks on the parchment that look suspiciously like paw prints and a small doodle of a bone. Then she gives Cerberus a quick pat on his middle head and mutters, "Try not to fall behind next time." We're still untangling the inventory log from the Heracles incident. Historians still argue whether the underworld's bureaucracy is an allegory for justice or a cosmic punishment in itself. Fringe scholars believe the paperwork is self-generating, sentient scrolls born from guilt and loose myth fragments. You're starting to believe the fringe. Palaxo collects her papers, snaps the scroll shut with practiced elegance, and glances at Cerberus one last time. Good boy, mostly. Then with no further explanation she steps backward through the square door, which closes silently behind her as though it was never there. You stare at the wall for a beat. Did that really just happen? You ask. Cerberus sneezes. The pantry seems quieter again, though now with the lingering scent of ink, papyrus, and a touch of embarrassment. You reflect. Even in a realm ruled by death, forms must be filed, rules must be followed, and even the scariest dog in mythology is not above getting scolded for missing his paperwork. It's humbling. You glance at Cerberus, who's now trying to chew the corner of a dry scroll he definitely should not be chewing. Don't, you say. He does it anyway. You sigh, walk over and gently tug it away, only to find it's a record of all incidents involving Cerberus and Loud Spoon. There are a lot. You roll it back up and pat his shoulder. You're doing great, you whisper, and weirdly all 3 heads lean into your hand at once. There are many ways to define loyalty in mythology, through battles, quests, loyalty oaths, enchanted collar, but none of them quite capture this feeling. A 3-headed beast, who knows your scent, trusts your presence, and allows you to take a scroll out of his mouth, without getting your hand bitten off. That's love. Or at least, underworld love. And in a world built on endings, that kind of beginning is rare. After Palaxo's exit, and your successful scroll rescue, Cerberus returns to his familiar sprawl across the pantry floor, tail twitching with just enough guilt to suggest he might have understood the paperwork scolding after all. You settle back into your flour sack perch, letting your breathing slow to match the rhythm of his. Inhale, 1, 2, 3, exhale, 1, 2, snore. You can almost feel your pulse sinking with the gentle thrum of underworld stillness. That is until the silence is shattered by clang. It's the unmistakable sound of something metal hitting something grumpy. You jolt upright. Cerberus lifts all 3 heads, alert and cranky, from the shadows of the corridor, dragging what appears to be a frying pan-shaped shield and wearing a helmet made from a colander, comes a child. No, not quite. A small deity, perhaps, face smudged, grin wide,
and attitude way too big for his height. "Heya," he chirps. "Name's Timos, god of questionable ideas and snacks that shouldn't exist." You blink. "You're not on the roster, are you?" "Not yet." He winks. Timos is a relatively unknown figure in myth, surfacing only in a few footnotes, and one poorly preserved vase painting where he appears to be deep-frying a lightning bolt. Fringe scholars believe he was a later invention, a joke that became a minor cult favorite. Mainstream historians reject the idea entirely, citing lack of narrative structure and too many marshmallows. Timos, apparently undeterred by historical dismissal, is here now, and he's brought a cart. It squeaks. It steams. It may be sent. Figured all fluffer nuggets here could use something new for once, Timos says, gesturing at Cerberus like they're old pals. "So I whipped up the underworld breakfast surprise." Cerberus sniffs. One head recoils. Another head sneezes. The third looks intrigued. You peer into the cart. Inside is a bubbling dish that glows faintly green and smells like a cinnamon roll left inside a forge for 3 months. Timos lifts the lid dramatically. It's got ghost pepper custard, charred ambrosia flakes, and a core of chilled lethe syrup. You instinctively take a step back. "I call it the forget-me-not again." Cerberus doesn't hesitate. He lunges forward, all 3 mouths devouring the dish in synchronized chaos. Slurp, crunch, gulp. You wait for the fallout. 3 seconds pass. Then boof, a fireball escapes Cerberus's middle mouth, floats 10 feet in the air, and slowly turns into the shape of a muffin before evaporating with a sigh. Timos cheers. Success. You stare at him. That wasn't food. That was a magical hazard. Same thing. Historians still argue whether Timos was a genuine deity or simply a personificaeus disguised as a toddler. But you're watching him now, high-fiving Cerberus's paw and spooning glowing mush into his own mouth, without blinking. Cerberus, to his credit, appears. All 3 heads wag in different directions. One begins chasing its own tail. Another just hums. Yes, hums. You don't know how, but it's in tune. You look at Timos. "So what's the point of all this?" He shrugs. "Joy, mischief, breakfast, same as everything else." He jumps back onto his squeaky cart and shouts, "Tell Hecate she still owes me cookies," before zipping off into the dark, leaving behind a trail of sprinkles and what might be time-distorted raisins. Cerberus flops down again, exhausted from the culinary roller coaster. You sit beside him, watching the last sprinkle fade like a shooting star. Maybe Timos isn't part of any official pantheon. Maybe the scholars are right to roll their eyes. But down here, where things often feel heavy and eternal, there's something refreshing about a god who shows up uninvited with dessert and chaos in equal measure. And judging by Cerberus's relaxed grin and cinnamon-scented breath, he agrees. For the first time in hours, you feel like you're no longer just observing this strange world. You're living in it, one enchanted snack at a time. By now, you've stopped asking what time it is, or if time even exists down here in a measurable way. Minutes melt into hours, breakfast becomes lunch, and now, as the cool stillness deepens, something that might be underworld afternoon settles over the pantry like velvet fog. Cerberus has flopped over once more, belly full of infernal custard, paws twitching with the memory of chasing whatever sprinkles dream themselves into. One head is resting against a barrel of expired ambrosia extract. The other 2 are tangled in each other's ear. You meanwhile are adjusting remarkably well to this subterranean rhythm. You no longer flinch when a scroll hums. You no longer question how pudding can glow. You've accepted that a pantry in Hades has a snack cart, a mop goddess, and a spontaneous god of magical mistakes. It's all fine. Which is precisely when the door creaks open again. A familiar scent rolls in, charcoal, citrus, and an uncomfortable trace of smugness. Ares, the god of war, steps into the pantry like it's a battlefield, arms crossed, sandals, somehow leaving scorch marks, helmet slung casually under one arm. His expression is somewhere between a grimace and a smirk, the look of someone who just remembered that one time a dog bit him and is still pretending it didn't hurt. "Is he still here?" Ares says, glancing at you with the disdain of a man who hasn't met carbs in centuries. Cerberus lifts his heads. 3 sets of narrowed eyes lock onto Ares. A slow, synchronized growl begins. not threatening but deeply judgmental. Don't look at me like that, Ares mutters. I brought something. He pulls out a package wrapped in leather, charred around the edge. Slowly he unrolls it to reveal a surprisingly delicate slice of, what is that? Battle loaf, he says. Recipe from Sparta. Ground olives, roasted lamb, and a pinch of blood orange zest. For morale, you blink. Cerberus blinks. One head sneezes. Ares glares. Fine. Yes, I'm here because Hades said I owe him for the chariot tire fire. He air quotes as if it wasn't his fault the river Lethe briefly caught fire. Said I had to give back to the household. Whatever that means. Cerberus sniffs the loaf, snorts. Then, gently he takes, and chews, and looks pleased. Ares straightens with pride. Ha! He likes it. One head continues eating. Another begins humming again. The third is chewing slowly while staring at Ares like he's reconsidering biting him again. But maybe less hard this time. It's a win. Well, Ares shrugs, clearly trying not to look sentimental. Guess we're good. He starts to leave then pauses. Don't tell anyone I made that. Especially Athena. You nod solemnly. Wouldn't dream of it. As he disappears back into the corridor, you look down at Cerberus. I didn't know you were into artisan war bread, you whisper. Cerberus responds by burping quietly and curling his paws under his chin. It's moments like these that don't show up in the ancient text. Historians still argue about whether Cerberus was ever truly tamed, whether he had loyalty to anyone other than Hades. But watching him now accepting gifts, giving side eyes, moderating mischief with a growl, you realize taming is the wrong word. He's not tamed. He's trusted. He chooses who to tolerate, who to humor, who to let into his space. And if you've been allowed to sit beside him without being vaporized or buried in a pile of symbolic bones, that's not taming, that's bonding. You reach out and scratch behind one of his ears, just gently, just one. All three tails thump in unison. In the heart of the underworld, where gods feud, memories dissolve, and no one ever really gets a lunch break, there's a three-headed guardian, who still knows the value of a simple snack, a respectful nudge, and a well-timed loaf. And in this realm of endings, that feels like a kind of peace.
Cerberus is dreaming again. You can tell because all three heads are twitching ever so slightly, ears flicking to phantom sounds, and one leg is making lazy paddling motions like he's swimming through a particularly satisfying puddle of underworld custard. His tail wags slowly, rhythmically, thumping against an empty urn with each beat. You're about to drift off beside him when you hear a soft, echoing plink. It happens again, then again. A series of gentle metallic taps, as though someone is trying to politely wake a bell to ask a question. You follow the sound, stepping lightly over scattered scrolls and snack debris, until you come to the rear corner of the pantry, the wall behind the flour sacks, which until now seemed like just another wall. Then the stones shift. You don't jump. Not anymore. You just sigh and say, of course. The stones slide open to reveal a narrow, arched doorway, with faintly glowing trim, like it's been outlined in starlight, or fermented jellyfish ink. Inside, a long corridor lined with dozens of bells hanging from silver threads, all gently chiming with no visible breeze. Cerberus rouses. Slowly, a deep inhale, 3 cracks of the neck, and a stretch so elaborate it sends ghost flour into the air in swirling spirals. He knows this place. Together you step through. At the end of the corridor is a circular chamber, a domed room that smells of cedarwood, warm parchment and stories waiting to be remembered. Here resides one of the most obscure and strangely beloved residents of the underworld, Neanderthals, the archivist of lost smells and forgotten breakfasts. No ancient scroll speaks clearly of Neanderthals. Fringe historians whisper about a former oracle who retired into shadow, tasked by Persephone to preserve memories too small for the gods to notice. The last bite of your favorite pastry, the scent of your grandmother's kitchen, the shape of your name when whispered through dream sleep. Neanderthals looks up from her scrolls, hundreds of them floating mid-air, each glowing faintly with a different color. She wears a robe the color of faded smoke, and her face is lined like the rings of an ancient tree. Her eyes, though, are warm. She says, "You brought it." Cerberus trots forward, tails wagging. He presses his noses into her hands one by one,
and she responds in kind with 3 gentle kisses to his foreheads. "Do you remember?" she asks softly. He rumbled. Then she produces what can only be described as a memory wafer, a translucent disc that shimmers like morning light on tea. She holds it to his middle head, and Cerberus changes, just slightly, a soft whine, a tilt of the ears. His eyes glaze for a moment. "He's tasting something he once loved," she explains to you, "but didn't know he missed." You ask, carefully, "What is it?" "Duck soup," she says, "from the kitchen of a Spartan widow who used to leave bones by the riverbank for him. He only saw her once." But dogs don't forget kindness. You're quiet a long time. This, you realize, is his real breakfast. Not bones, not pudding, not enchanted biscuits or infernal custard. It's memory, emotion, connection, the scent of a meal once offered with care, the feeling of being known. Cerberus lies down beside Mimos, content. One head rests on her lap, the other 2 begin to drift. She smiles, stroking his fur. "So many think the underworld is about endings," she says, "but it is also a library of taste and scent and moments that mattered once." You know. "And he remembers it all?" "No," she replies, "he carries it, so others don't have to." Historians, of course, will never agree on whether Cerberus has emotions. Most accounts reduce him to a beast, a challenge, an obstacle. But as you sit here watching him sleep beside a woman who stores forgotten mornings in scrolls of breath and tea, you understand that he is far more. He is memory's guardian. He is the soft growl that protects the gentle moments. He is the keeper of breakfasts worth remembering. And in this hidden chamber beyond time, as bells continue to sing softly, and memory wafers glow like fireflies, you let your eyes close. Just for a moment, not the aggressive funk of underworld stews or fermented pudding this time. This is something simpler, toasted grain, a faint wisp of honey, and the unmistakable nostalgic note of warm milk over a quiet stove. Cerberus is already awake. He's sitting beside you, no longer curled in a lazy heap, but upright, dignified, almost regal. All 3 heads are alert, but not tense. Just aware, watching, protecting. Mimos is gone. The scrolls hover still, gently rotating above the domed room like the solar system of a quiet, dusty library. One glows with a soft amber hue, and as you pass beneath it, you feel the memory rather than see it. Sitting at a stone table with your first friend, sharing bread you split unevenly on purpose. It's startling. Cerberus nudges you gently, a signal. It's time to go. Together you step back through the corridor of bells. Each one rings as you pass, not in warning but in recognition, like wind chimes that remember who you used to be. You emerge into the pantry again, and everything has changed and not changed at all. The cauldron has been cleaned, the scrolls stacked neatly. Someone, possibly Sponja, has left a folded note on the table that says, "Don't touch the red jar again." Cerberus pads forward and sniffs the note. All 3 heads snort in amusement. Then from behind a curtain of hanging vines, where did those come from? A figure steps out carrying a tray. It's Persephone. This time no divine glow, no ceremony, just a woman in a soft linen tunic, barefoot, her hair braided loosely. She places the tray on the low stone table and nods at Cerberus. "Today's final meal," she says. Cerberus waits, patient. She turns to you. "He doesn't need food," she says quietly, "but he needs to eat." You glance down at the tray. Barley cakes shaped like bones, pomegranate compote in a smooth spiral, and a single sprig of mint. There's nothing magical about it. It's not glowing. It doesn't hum. It's just beautifully simple. Persephone sits beside Cerberus, stroking one of his ears. "There's always one last meal," she says, more to herself than anyone else. "The one we remember. The one we'd ask for if we knew it was the end." Cerberus begins to eat. Not ravenous, not even hungrily, just gratefully, like someone honoring the moment, not feeding the stomach. 1 bite per head, 1 pause between each. The tails don't wag. The room is too quiet for that. This is ceremony now, and you strangely feel honored to witness. Historians still debate whether Persephone truly ruled beside Hades, or beneath him, whether her time in the underworld was chosen, or taken. But here now she radiates agency, grace, authority. She does not just reign, she nurtures,
and Cerberus is her oldest companion. She looks at you again. Will you remember this? She asks. You hesitate, then nod. Good, she whispers. That's what makes it real. Cerberus finishes. 3 content sighs, 3 full bellies, 1 ancient bond reaffirmed. Persephone rises, and vanishes through the archway again. Barefoot steps silent. You and Cerberus remain. It is not a sad moment, not even an ending, just fullness. He curls up once more, not like a beast this time, but like a dog who knows his place, his purpose, his home. You lie beside him, shoulder to shoulder, cheek to warm flesh, and for the first time, you feel not like a guest, but like someone allowed to stay. The pantry dims, the bones settle, and the scent of barley lingers, gently fading into dreams. Time or whatever passes for it here slows to the point of stillness. Cerberus sleeps, coiled like an obsidian seashell, the soft rise and fall of his chest sinking with the dim pulse of the pantry's quiet magic. Each of his 3 heads rests differently, one nose tucked under a paw, one tilted skyward, and the third facing you directly, eyes closed but peaceful. There's no tension left in his body, only contentment. You stay still, barely breathing. If you move too quickly, this moment might vanish. If you speak too loudly, it might echo and bounce away forever. So you lie there, bathed in silence, letting the warm afterglow of food, ritual and companionship settle into your bones. It's a strange thing to feel so much meaning in something so mundane. A nap, a snack, a lick on the hand. But that's what the underworld has taught you. Not all significance is loud, not all love is dramatic. Sometimes the most mythic thing you can do is stay. You glance toward the shelves and realize something. Each of the jars, scrolls and bundles tells a story, not just of history, but of meals, tiny moments, choices made, lives honored. There's a pot, labeled for the one who waited, another, a feast never served, a tiny delicate bottle marked first smell of cinnamon, age. You begin to understand what Persephone meant when she said that last meals matter, because Cerberus isn't just the gatekeeper, he's the collector, the last witness, the one who stands at the edge, not to bar the path, but to remember you were there, a memory keeper a guardian of goodbyes. Fringe philosophers have proposed that Cerberus's 3 heads may represent the past, present and future. Mainstream scholars dismiss it as over-sentimentalizing a mythological creature, but lying here with the scent of mint and barley still in the air, and the dog breathing calmly beside you, you believe it might just be true. The past, what he's already carried. The present, what you share now. And the future, whatever comes after this dream. You rest your hand gently on the fur of his middle shoulder. He doesn't stir, but one of his tails gives a lazy, silent thump against the floor. That's all the response you need. Eventually the pantry will fade, the scrolls will close. You'll return to wherever you came from, waking life perhaps, or another story entirely. But this will stay. Forever. The scent of the underworld's pantry spice, smoke, and a sweetness you can't name, settles into your lungs like a forgotten memory you didn't know you missed. You let go of names, of roles, of expectations. There is no need to guard or fight or prove anything here. You are not a hero, you are not a guest, you are simply you, and you are enough. Cerberus knows this. He has watched the bravest tremble and the meek stand tall. He has heard promises and last words, lullabies and regrets, and still he curls beside you, warm and unwavering. No threats, no teeth, just trust. Somewhere beyond these walls the rivers still flow, the spirits still wander, the gods still bicker over ambrosia ratios. But none of that matters now. Not here, not in this stillness. Here you are held, by stone, by silence, by the soft weight of a 3-headed dog, who has eaten, rested and made peace with you. So breathe, let your limbs grow heavy, let your eyes drift closed like petals folding in moonlight. Let yourself be lulled, not by song, but by the steady rhythm of a place that exists between between endings. You are not alone. You are remembered. You are safe. Sweet dreams.